Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Tonight, just like always, we're going to slow things down a bit. Sit back, relax, maybe you've got a game running in the background, maybe you're just lying in bed trying to fall asleep. However you're listening, I'm really glad you're here. Before we get into it, let me know in the comments how you're listening tonight. Are you playing something chill like Minecraft or Stardew Valley, or just letting this play while you drift off? Alright. Let's get into the first story. So this happened about a year ago, and honestly, I still think about it sometimes because I genuinely can't believe how quickly things spiraled. I live alone in a small one-bedroom apartment. Nothing fancy, but it's comfortable. I work from home, so having my own space is really important to me. It's kind of my safe zone. Anyway, I have this friend, let's call him Aaron. Aaron and I go way back. We met in college, had a few classes together, hung out a bit, not best friends, but definitely close enough that I trusted him. We hadn't seen each other in person for a while, but we'd kept in touch online. You know how it is, occasional messages, memes, that kind of thing. One day, out of nowhere, he texts me. Hey man, quick question, any chance I could crash at your place for like a week? Now, already, I should have been more cautious. But he explained that his lease had ended, his new place wasn't ready yet, and he just needed somewhere to stay temporarily. He made it sound super straightforward, just a few days, maybe a week at most. And I thought, okay, it's Aaron, I know him, he's not some random person, so I said yes. That was mistake number one. He showed up 2 days later with more stuff than I expected. Not like moving truck level, but definitely more than just crashing for a few days. He had a suitcase, a backpack, and this big duffel bag. I remember joking like, dude, are you moving in? And he laughed and said, nah man, just like to be prepared. That should have been my second warning. The first couple of days were fine, honestly totally normal. We hung out, watched some shows, ordered food. It actually felt kind of nice having someone around for a change, but by day 3 little things started to feel off. Nothing huge at first, just small stuff. Like I'd wake up and notice things in my apartment had been moved. Not in a dramatic way, just slightly. A chair angled differently, something on the counter shifted. At first I thought maybe I was just being forgetful. But then one morning I went into the kitchen and saw that my coffee machine was gone from its usual spot. Not gone completely, just moved to the other side of the counter. And that's when I asked him, hey, did you move my coffee machine? And he just casually goes, yeah, it made more sense over there, made more sense. That phrase stuck with me because it wasn't like he asked, he didn't even mention it. He just decided, and I laughed it off at the time. I didn't want to make it a big deal, but looking back, that was the moment things started to shift. Over the next couple of days, it kept happening. He rearranged things in the fridge, moved my dishes around. Even changed the position of my couch slightly, saying it improved the flow of the room. The flow of the room in my apartment. I started feeling weird about it, like I wasn't fully in control of my own space anymore, but I kept telling myself I was overreacting. I mean, he's just staying for a week, right? It's not worth causing tension over something small. Right, so at this point, I'm starting to feel a little uncomfortable. But not in a way I can fully explain. It's more like that quiet feeling in the back of your mind that something isn't right, but you don't have enough evidence to actually call it out. And that's the worst kind of feeling, because you start questioning yourself. Like, am I being too picky? Is this just normal when someone stays over? So I let it go. Again, but then things got more noticeable. One evening I finished work a bit later than usual. I walked out of my room, expecting everything to be the same as I left it, and immediately something felt off. The lighting was different, not just because of the time of day, no, the lamps were moved. My standing lamp was now in the corner instead of next to the couch, and one of my smaller desk lamps was now on the kitchen counter. I just stood there for a second, looking around, trying to process it, and Aaron was just sitting there on the couch, scrolling on his phone like nothing happened, so I asked him again, hey, did you move the lamps? And without even looking up, he goes, yeah, it just feels better this way. That phrase again, it feels better, not I thought you might like it. Not I was experimenting. Just he decided what felt better in my space. I remember sitting down across from him and just watching him for a second, trying to figure out if I was missing something. And then I said, hey man, can you just ask me before moving stuff around? And he finally looked up, and for a split second, his expression changed, not dramatically, just enough, like I'd said something unexpected. Then he smiled and said, yeah, of course, my bad. And that should have been the end of it. Right, except it was. Because the next morning I woke up and went into the bathroom and my things were rearranged there too. My toothbrush moved. My towel folded differently and placed on a different hook. Even my shampoo bottles were lined up in a way I never do. And that's when it stopped feeling like random behavior and started feeling intentional. Like he wasn't just moving things, he was reshaping the space. Quietly, gradually, like he was trying to make it his. And I know that sounds dramatic, but when you live alone, you get used to everything being exactly where you left it. It becomes an extension of you. So when someone starts changing that without asking, it feels invasive, even if it's subtle. That day I decided I needed to set a clearer boundary. Nothing aggressive, just direct. So later that afternoon I said, "Hey, can we talk for a second?" And he immediately looked a little tense, like he already knew what it was about. I kept it calm. I told him, "I'm totally fine with you staying here, but I need my space to stay the way I set it up. If something needs to change, just check with me first." Simple, reasonable, at least I thought so, and he nodded. But this time he didn't smile. He just said, "Yeah, got it." Short, flat, and then he went back to his phone. And something about that response didn't sit right with me because it didn't feel like agreement, it felt like compliance. Like he was going along with it, but not actually okay with it. That night was quiet, too quiet. We didn't really talk much, no jokes, no hanging out like before, just this weird tension sitting in the room between us. And I told myself, okay. Maybe I overdid it. Maybe I made it awkward. Maybe he's just embarrassed. But then around midnight, I heard something, very faint, like movement in the living room. At first I thought maybe I imagined it, but then I heard it again. A soft dragging sound, like something being moved, slowly, and I just lay there in bed staring at the ceiling. Listening, trying to decide if I should get up or just ignore it. So I'm eliegeru vercaer or veratere. Completely still, just listening. That sound happens again. Slow dragging, like something heavy being moved across the floor, but very carefully, like whoever is doing it doesn't want to make noise. And at that moment, my brain starts doing that thing, where it tries to explain everything in the safest way possible. Oh, he's probably just getting water. Maybe he dropped something. Maybe it's nothing. But at the same time, I know what my apartment sounds like. I know the difference between normal movement and something that is. And this wasn't normal. So I check my phone. 12:17 a.m., way too late for random rearranging. I stay still for another minute, then two, and the sound stops completely, just silence. And that silence somehow feels worse, because now I don't know what's happening anymore. So I finally decide, all right, I'm going to check. I get up slowly, trying not to make noise, open my door just a little, and look out into the living room. And the first thing I notice is that the lights are off, completely dark, except for a little bit of light coming in from the street outside. And Aaron is standing there, in the middle of the room, not moving, just standing, facing the wall. And for a second, I genuinely freeze, because my brain doesn't process it right away. It just doesn't make sense. Like, why would someone be standing in the dark, facing a wall at 12:17 in the morning? I just stay there, holding the door slightly open, trying to figure out what I'm looking at. And then he moves, just slightly. Like he shifts his weight. And that's when I realize he's not just standing, he's looking at something on the wall. So I open the door a bit more and say, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he turns his head slowly, like I just pulled him out of something. And even in the low light, I can see his expression. And it's not normal, not scared, not surprised, just blank, completely blank. Then he blinks a couple of times and suddenly it's like he snaps back. "Oh, hey man," he says. Like nothing is wrong, I couldn't sleep. I just stand there for a second, still trying to process everything. And I ask, "What were you doing?" And he glances at the wall, then back at me. "Oh, nothing, just thinking in the dark, staring at the wall at midnight." And again my brain tries to smooth it over. Maybe he's stressed. Maybe he's just weird about sleep. People do odd things sometimes. So I nod slowly and say, "Okay." And he just walks past me toward the kitchen. Like that whole moment didn't happen, like it was completely normal. I go back to my room, close the door, and just sit on the edge of my bed. And now I'm fully awake. No chance of sleeping, because something about that interaction feels wrong. Not dangerous exactly, just off, like I just saw something I wasn't supposed to see. The next morning, he acts completely normal, like completely. Making coffee, scrolling his phone, even cracking a couple jokes. And that almost makes it worse, because now I start wondering, did I overreact? Was it really that strange, or am I just making it into something bigger than it is? So I test it, casually. While we're sitting there, I say, "Hey, you were up pretty late last night," and he shrugs. "Yeah, couldn't sleep." No hesitation, no mention of standing in the dark, no explanation, nothing, so I push just a little. "You were in the living room, right?" And he nods. "Yeah," and I wait just to see if he says anything else, but he doesn't. He just takes a sip of coffee like that's the end of it. And that's when I realize he's not going to acknowledge it at all, and for the rest of the day I can't shake that image, him standing there, in the dark, facing the wall, completely still, like he was waiting. So after that night, something definitely changed. Not just in how I saw him, but in how the whole apartment felt. It's hard to explain, but it didn't feel like my place anymore. It felt like shared space, but not in a comfortable way. more like I was the guest and he was settling in. Over the next couple of days I started noticing new things, not just rearranging anymore, patterns, little habits. For example, he started waking up earlier than me, which isn't weird on its own, but what was weird is that every time I woke up, something had changed, and I don't mean big, obvious changes, I mean subtle ones, too subtle, like the kind of things you only notice if you live alone. A drawer slightly open, a book turned the wrong way, my keys not exactly where I left them, but close enough that you doubt yourself. At first I kept telling myself the same thing, you're just being paranoid. But then one morning I decided to test it. Before going to bed I placed my keys in a very specific position on the table. Not just on the table, I angled them in a way that was unnatural, something I would never do by accident, and I made a mental note of it, very clearly. The next morning I walked out into the living room and the keys were still there. Same spot, same angle. For a second I actually felt relieved. Like, okay, see, you're imagining things, but then I got closer, and I noticed something. They were in the same position, but flipped. Like someone had picked them up, looked at them, and placed them back down carefully, trying to recreate the exact position, but not quite getting it right, and that feeling hit me again, that quiet, heavy feeling, like something was happening just outside of what I could fully prove. I didn't say anything that day, I just watched, paid more attention, and that's when I started noticing something else. Aaron was watching me too, not in an obvious way. He wasn't staring constantly or anything like that, but every now and then I'd catch him, just for a second, looking at me, and when I looked back he'd look away immediately, like he'd been caught doing something he shouldn't, and again not enough to confront, but enough to make me uneasy. Then came the moment that really changed everything. It was late afternoon. I was working at my desk, headphones on focused, and I suddenly got that feeling, you know the one. Like someone is behind you, watching, so I turned around and he was standing in the doorway of my room, just standing there, not saying anything, not knocking, just there, and I actually jumped a little. Jude, you scared me, I said, and he just smiled slightly, not a full smile, just a small one, and said, sorry, didn't want to interrupt. But that didn't make sense because he already had, so I asked, what's up? And he paused for a second like he was thinking. Then he said, nothing, just checking what you were doing. Just checking, again simple words, but the way he said it didn't feel simple. It felt deliberate, like he was observing something, collecting information, and I know how that sounds. I know it sounds like I'm reading too much into it. But when you combine it with everything else, it starts to feel different. So I just nodded and said, just working. And he stood there for another second, then slowly nodded back and walked away. And I sat there staring at the doorway, with this growing realization that this wasn't just a friend crashing for a week anymore. Something about this situation was turning into something else. Something I didn't understand yet, but I could feel it getting closer. At this point, I'm not relaxed in my own apartment anymore. I'm not comfortable. I'm not even neutral. Alert, constantly, like my brain has switched into this quiet monitoring mode where I'm always aware of where he is. What he's doing, whether he's moving, whether it's too quiet, and the worst part is I still don't have anything concrete, nothing I can point to and say, okay, this is definitely not normal. It's all just patterns, feelings, moments that don't quite make sense, so I decide to do something different. Instead of reacting, I start observing, more intentionally. That evening I stay in the living room longer than usual. We're both there, he's on his phone. I'm pretending to watch something on TV, but really I'm watching him. Subtly, and I notice something strange. Every time I shift position he notices. Not immediately, but within a second or two, like he's aware of my movement even when he's not looking directly at me. At one point I lean forward slightly and I see his eyes flick up from his phone, just for a split second, then back down like he's checking, monitoring, again small but consistent, and after a while, I decide to test something. I stand up, stretch a bit, and say I'm gonna grab something from my room. Normal, casual, he nods, doesn't look up. I walk into my room, but I don't close the door fully. I leave it just slightly open, enough to see through, and I wait. 5 seconds, 10, 15, and then he looks up, slowly. Not like someone reacting, like someone expecting something. He stares at the doorway, at the small gap, and then he stands up, very quietly, and starts walking toward my room. And at that moment, my heart actually starts beating faster, because now this isn't just a feeling anymore. This is something I can see, something real. I step back from the door quickly and sit down at my desk, trying to make it look like I've just been there the whole time. And a second later he appears in the doorway, same as before, standing there, watching, and I turn around like I just noticed him. Hey, and again that slight smile. Just seeing what you're up to. The same line, almost exactly the same. And this time it hits differently, because now I know he came to check, not casually, not randomly. He waited, then followed, and I just nod again, keep it normal, but inside something shifts because now I'm not just uncomfortable, I'm certain. Something is wrong. That night I don't sleep much, I keep my door closed, locked, for the first time since he got there, and even that decision feels heavy. Like I'm crossing a line, but at the same time it feels necessary. At around 2 a.m. I wake up, not fully, just that light sleep where you're aware, and I hear something. A soft sound, right outside my door, not movement across the room, not distant, close, very close, like right on the other side, and I hold my breath, listening, and then a faint sound, almost like a hand brushing against the door, slowly, not knocking, not trying to open it, just touching it, and I don't move. I don't make a sound. I just lie there completely still, waiting, and after a few seconds the sound stops. And then footsteps, slow, walking away, and I stay there for what feels like forever, staring into the dark, with one thought repeating in my head: he knows I locked the door. I don't say anything the next morning, not because everything is fine, but because I'm trying to understand what I'm dealing with, because now it's not just uncomfortable, it's not just strange, it's deliberate. He came to my door late at night, and didn't knock, didn't say anything, just stood there. So I decide I need clarity, not guesses, not assumptions, something real. That day I leave the apartment for a few hours on purpose. I tell him I've got errands, maybe some work outside, nothing unusual, and he just nods, same calm expression. All right, but as I'm leaving I get that feeling again, like he's watching me, and when I close the door I just know. He's still standing there, listening, so I don't go far. I walk down the street, wait a few minutes, then come back. Quietly, carefully, and I unlock the door as slowly as I can, trying not to make a sound, and when I step inside, the apartment is silent, too silent, and immediately I feel it, that same shift in the air, like I've walked into something mid-action, so I move slowly. No footsteps if I can help it, and I glance toward the living room. Empty, kitchen, empty. But then I hear something from my room, a faint sound, like a drawer closing, and my chest tightens, because I know I left everything as it was, so I walk toward my room. Slow, controlled, and the door is slightly open, wider than I remember, and I push it gently and he's inside, standing near my desk, looking at something. And the second the door moves, he turns, fast, too fast, like he didn't expect me to be there, and for a split second. There's something in his expression, not surprise, not embarrassment, something sharper, something caught, and then it's gone, replaced with that same calm look. "Oh, you're back early," he says, like nothing is wrong, like he's not standing in my room, and I just look at him. No smile, no pretending, just looking, and I say, "What are you doing in my room?" And this time he doesn't answer right away. There's a pause, just a second, but it's enough to confirm everything. Then he shrugs slightly and says, "Just looking for a charger." A charger in my room without asking, and I take a step inside. Slowly, and I glance at my desk, and that's when I see it, my notebook, open, not just open, flipped to a page, one I didn't leave it on, and I feel something cold settle in my chest, because now it's not subtle anymore. It's not just rearranging, it's not just watching, he's going through my things, and I look back at him. And I say, "Don't go in my room." Simple, flat, no emotion, and he just nods, again, but this time that nod feels different, not agreement, not even compliance. More like acknowledgement, like he understands the rule, but not because he respects it, because now it's been said out loud. And there's this silence, heavy, uncomfortable, and then he walks past me, out of the room, without another word, and I stand there, looking at my desk, at the open notebook. At the space that used to feel like mine, and I realize something. This situation is not temporary anymore, and it's not harmless. And whatever is going on with him, it's not going to stop on its own. After that, something in me just clicks, because now there's no ambiguity left. No, maybe I'm overthinking. No, maybe it's nothing. He was in my room, going through my stuff, while I was gone. And the worst part isn't even terror, che terror or in terror este yerlal. It's how calm he was when I caught him, like it wasn't wrong, like it was normal. So that night I make a decision. I'm not going to wait for things to escalate. I'm not going to pretend everything is fine. I'm going to end this. Clean, simple, no drama. So around evening I sit down in the living room. He's there already, same as always, scrolling, quiet. And I say, "Hey, we need to talk." And he looks up, immediately attentive, like he's been waiting for this. I keep my tone steady. No weirdness, I just think it's time you find another place. And for a second he doesn't react, just looks at me, completely still. Then he says, "What?" like he didn't hear me, or like he wants me to repeat it. So I do. "I'm serious. This was supposed to be a week. It's been longer. I'm not comfortable anymore." And there it is. Out in the open, and the silence after that feels heavy, thick, and then he smiles, slowly, but this time it's not the same smile. There's something else in it, something tight. "You're overreacting," he says, calm, almost amused, and I shake my head. No, I'm not, and now his expression shifts just slightly, the smile fades, and he leans back a little. Because I moved a few things around, he says, like that's all it is, like that's the only thing that happened, and I don't argue. Don't list everything because I already know he knows, so I just say you were in my room, and for the first time there's a pause, a real one, not a casual silence, a calculation, and then he shrugs. I told you I was looking for a charger. Same line, same tone, but now it sounds rehearsed, like he's sticking to it, and I just look at him and I say you didn't ask, and he leans forward slightly, and his voice drops just a bit. I didn't think it was a big deal. That sentence hits differently now, because I've heard it before, not from him, but in situations like this, where someone crosses a line and then minimizes it, like your reaction is the problem, not their behavior, and I feel that frustration rise up, but I keep it controlled. I say, it is a big deal, and now the air changes completely because this isn't passive anymore, this is confrontation, and he just stares at me, longer than normal, too long. Like he's trying to read something, and then he says, so what, you're kicking me out, and I nod. Yes, simple, final, and for a moment he doesn't move, doesn't speak, just sits there, and then he laughs quietly, not loud, not natural, just short, and he shakes his head. Wow, he says, and there's something in his tone now, something colder. I didn't think you'd be like this, and I don't respond, because I don't even know what that means, and honestly, I don't care, so I just say, I'll give you a couple days, that's it. And I stand up, conversation over, at least for me, but as I turn to walk away he says something, quiet, almost under his breath, but I hear it. Some people don't like being watched, I guess, and I stop just for a second, not turning around because I don't want to give him that, but inside that sentence lands, hard, because now he's not even hiding it. I don't respond to that. I just keep walking back into my room, close the door, and this time I lock it immediately. No hesitation, because whatever that wasn't a joke, that wasn't awkward phrasing, that was intentional, and I sit there for a while just processing because now everything lines up. The watching, the moving things, the standing in the dark, the checking on me, the door at night, it all connects, and for the first time I don't feel confused anymore. I feel certain that night is quiet. Too quiet again, but this time I don't leave my room, I don't check, I don't listen for footsteps, I just stay inside and wait. The next couple of days are tense but controlled. He doesn't touch my things anymore, at least not that I can see. He doesn't come near my room, doesn't stand in the doorway, doesn't watch me openly. It's like he adjusted, like he knows the situation changed. But the energy is still there, that same underlying tension, like something unresolved is just sitting between us. We barely talk, only when necessary, short, neutral, almost formal. And then on the second day he starts packing. No announcement, no conversation, just quietly putting his things together, and I watch from a distance. Not helping, not interfering, just observing, because now I don't trust anything, not even normal behavior. And right before he leaves, he stops by the door, bag over his shoulder, and he looks at me for a few seconds. Longer than necessary, and then he says, you notice a lot more when someone's watching you. And again, that sentence. That same tone, like he's telling me something but not fully, and I don't answer, I just nod because I don't want to give him anything. Not a reaction, not a conversation, nothing. And after a second he opens the door, steps out, and leaves, and just like that it's over, or at least that's what I thought, because the apartment goes quiet again. Real quiet, the kind of quiet I used to enjoy, but now it feels different, like I'm listening for something. Even when there's nothing there. The first night alone I walk through the apartment slowly, checking everything, my room, the bathroom, the kitchen, like I need to confirm that it's mine again, that nothing's changed, and everything looks normal, exactly how I left it. But when I get back to my desk I stop, because something is there, small, easy to miss, my notebook closed, placed exactly where I always keep it. But there's a pen on top of it, perfectly centered, and I know. I didn't leave it like that, and for a second I just stand there, looking at it, trying to decide if this is just coincidence, if I forgot, if I'm imagining it. But then I realize something. It doesn't matter, because even if it is nothing, it doesn't feel like nothing anymore. And that's the part that stayed with me, not what he did, not even how strange it was, but how it changed the way I felt in my own space, even after he was gone, and to this day. I still double-check my door before going to sleep. I still notice when things are slightly out of place. And sometimes, when it's really quiet, I think about that night, when I opened the door and saw him standing there in the dark, just watching. All right, that one was definitely a bit unsettling. Not even because of something big happening, but because of how subtle it all was. The kind of situation where nothing is technically wrong, until suddenly it very much is. Anyway. Let's shift gears a little for the next one. This next story is less creepy, but somehow just as frustrating. It's about someone who thought they were helping out a friend and ended up getting completely taken advantage of in the process. Let's get into it. So this happened about 2 years ago, and it's one of those situations where looking back, every red flag was there, I just chose to ignore it. At the time, I was working at a pretty decent company. Nothing huge, but stable, good environment, decent pay, the kind of job you don't want to lose over something stupid. I'd been there for about a year and a half, built a good reputation, got along with my team, and my manager trusted me, which is important for later. Now I had this friend, let's call him Jason. Jason and I weren't childhood friends or anything, but we'd known each other for a while. Met through mutual friends, hung out occasionally, played games together, grabbed drinks here and there. He was fun, charismatic, the kind of guy who could talk to anyone. But at the same time, he always seemed a little unstable when it came to work. He'd bounce between jobs, always had a story about why things didn't work out. Bad management, toxic environment. They didn't appreciate me, and I believed him because why wouldn't I? When you hear one side of the story long enough, it starts to sound like the truth. Anyway, one day he messages me. Hey man, quick question, your company hiring? And I already knew where this was going. He explains that he just left his job again and he's looking for something new. Says he's serious this time. Says he really wants stability. And then he asks if I can refer him. Now this is where I should have paused, because referring someone isn't just helping them. You're putting your name on the line, your reputation. If they mess up, it reflects on you. But instead of thinking it through, I focused on the good parts. He just needs a chance. I know him, he's not that bad. Maybe he just had bad luck before. So I said yes, that was mistake number 1. I helped him with his resume, cleaned it up, even coached him a bit before the interview. What to say, what not to say, how to present himself. And to his credit, he nailed it. Absolutely nailed it. Confident, smooth, great energy. The hiring manager loved him. And a week later he got the job, same department as me, same team, and at first everything seemed fine. Actually better than fine. He was motivated, showed up on time, asked questions, even thanked me a couple times for helping him get in, and I remember thinking, okay, maybe I was wrong about him. Maybe he just needed the right environment. Maybe this is going to work out. The first few weeks it did. No issues, no drama, just normal work, and I relaxed completely. Because in my mind, the risk had passed, he was doing well, everyone liked him, I had nothing to worry about. Right, so for the first few weeks, everything really did seem fine. Jason was doing his tasks, asking questions, getting along with people. Even my manager mentioned once, hey, good referral, he's fitting in well. And I remember feeling relieved, okay. That could have gone badly, but it didn't, so I stopped paying close attention. Which was mistake number 2, because the changes didn't happen suddenly. They were gradual, subtle, easy to ignore. At first, he just started showing up a little later than usual, nothing dramatic, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and every time he had a reason. Traffic was insane. My alarm didn't go off, had a rough night, normal stuff, things people say all the time, and since he was still getting his work done. No one really pushed it. Then he started taking longer breaks. Again, not obvious at first, just stretching things out, coffee breaks that turned into 20 minutes. Lunch that somehow lasted over an hour, and if anyone asked, he'd laugh it off. Man, I just needed a reset, and people would let it go because he was likable. That's the thing about Jason. He knew how to smooth things over, always, but then it started affecting his work. Deadlines slipping, small mistakes. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to notice, and I remember one moment very clearly. We had this shared task, nothing huge but important enough. We split it 50-50, I finished my part early, sent it over, and waited for him to complete his section. Hours pass, nothing, so I message him. Hey, you almost done? And he replies, yeah, just polishing it. Another hour, still nothing. At that point, I'm getting a bit concerned, because the deadline is getting close. So I walk over to his desk, and he's just scrolling, phone in hand, completely relaxed, and I say, hey, what's up with the task? And he looks up, not even stressed. Oh yeah, I'll finish it, don't worry, that phrase again, and I felt that little spark of irritation, but I pushed it down because I didn't want to be that guy, the one micromanaging, so I went back to my desk, waited a bit more, and eventually he submitted his part, barely on time. And when I looked at it, it was rushed, sloppy, clearly last minute, so I ended up fixing parts of it quietly without saying anything, because again I didn't want to make it a big deal, and that's where I messed up because that became the pattern. He'd delay, rush, submit something half done, and I'd clean it up to protect the project, to protect the team, and if I'm being honest, to protect myself, because at the end of the day, my name was attached to this too. And that's the part that started bothering me, because I realized I wasn't just helping him get a job anymore, I was carrying him, and the more I did it, the more he seemed to rely on it, like it became expected. At one point he even joked, "Man, I'm glad we're on the same team, you've got my back," and he laughed, but I didn't because something about that felt a little too real. And that's when I started noticing something else. When things went well, he took the credit. Openly. In meetings, he'd present our work like it was mostly his. Not completely ignoring me, but definitely shifting the balance. And I'd sit there thinking, wait, that was my part. But again, I didn't say anything, because calling it out in a meeting feels awkward, petty, so I stayed quiet, and that silence started to cost me. So at this point, I'm stuck in this weird position. On one hand, I don't want to be the guy who complains about his own friend, especially someone I brought into the company. But on the other hand, it's becoming obvious that something isn't right, and the more I ignore it, the worse it gets. It reaches a point where I'm checking his work before submitting anything, every time. Not because I want to, but because I don't trust it anymore. And that's exhausting, because now I'm basically doing two jobs, mine and half of his. But the real turning point comes during a team meeting. We're presenting results from a project we worked on together, a bigger one this time. Something the higher-ups are actually paying attention to, so there's more pressure, more visibility, and Jason volunteers to present, which to be fair he's good at, confident speaker, charismatic, knows how to sell things, so I let him, and at first everything is fine. He's walking through the slides explaining the strategy, the results, the outcomes, and I'm sitting there thinking, okay, this is going smoothly. Until he starts talking about a specific part of the project. The core part, the part I built almost entirely myself. And he says, so what I did here was, and I feel it immediately, that shift, that moment where something crosses a line, because now it's not just vague credit shifting, it's direct, clear. He's presenting my work as his, and I just sit there for a second, processing it, trying to decide, do I say something, do I interrupt, do I let it go? And that hesitation costs me, because he keeps going, confident, smooth, and no one questions it. Why would they? He sounds convincing, and I stay silent again, and after the meeting my manager pulls me aside and says something that honestly hits harder than I expected. You've been a bit quiet lately. Quiet, that's what she noticed. Not the extra work, not the corrections, not the fact that I basically carried parts of the project. Just quiet, and I nod. Say something like, yeah, just focusing on getting things done. And she smiles, but it's not a fully convinced smile. And then she says, make sure your contributions are visible. And that sentence sticks with me, because it's subtle but it means something. It means she's noticing something is off, but she doesn't have the full picture, and I'm not giving it to her, so from her perspective it looks like Jason is stepping up, and I'm fading back, and that realization hits hard. Because now it's not just annoying, it's affecting how I'm seen at work, my reputation, the thing I was trying to protect, and the worst part, Jason doesn't seem to care at all. Later that day I bring it up casually, nothing aggressive, just, hey, during the meeting you said you did that part, but that was mostly mine. And he doesn't even hesitate. Oh yeah, but we worked on it together. That phrase, again, minimizing, blurring the line. And I shake my head slightly. Not really. And for a second his expression changes, just a little, like he's annoyed, but then he shrugs. Does it matter? The team looks good. And that right there tells me everything I need to know, because for him, it's not about accuracy, it's not about fairness, it's about perception. And as long as things look good, he's fine taking whatever credit comes with it, even if it's not his. And that's when I realize this isn't going to fix itself. And if I don't do something, it's only going to get worse. After that conversation, something shifts in me, because now I'm not just annoyed, I'm aware, fully aware of what's happening, and more importantly, what it's starting to cost me. So I decide to change how I handle things. No confrontation yet, no big scene, just adjustments. I stop fixing his work silently. That's the first thing. If he submits something rushed or incomplete, I leave it. I don't clean it up. Don't cover for him, because I realize every time I do that I'm protecting him at my own expense, and at first nothing happens because he doesn't notice. He assumes things are the same, that I'll keep backing him up, but then it catches up. We get assigned another shared task. Deadline is tight, same setup as before, and just like before he delays, says he's almost done, says he's just polishing. Same pattern, but this time I don't step in. I finish my part, submit it. Leave his section exactly as he sends it. And when the final version goes out, it's obvious. The difference in quality, clear, noticeable, and suddenly people start asking questions, nothing aggressive, just, hey, this part feels a bit rushed. Was this finalized? And I stay quiet, I don't throw him under the bus, I don't explain, I just let the work speak for itself, and Jason notices. Of course he does. After that he comes up to me, not angry, not yet, Maury. Confused, hey, why didn't you fix that part? Fix that part, like it's expected, like it's my role, and I just look at him and say, I didn't write it. simple, neutral, and for a second he just stares at me like he's trying to understand what changed, then he laughs a little. Come on, man, you know how this works. And that line hits differently now because now I see it clearly. This isn't accidental, this is a system, one where he benefits, and I compensate. And I shake my head. No, I'm not doing that anymore. And that's the moment, the real turning point, because his expression changes. No smile this time, no casual attitude, just irritation. So you're just going to let the team look bad, he says, and I almost laugh because that's the angle he chooses, not responsibility, not ownership, but blame, and I respond calmly, I'm doing my part, and there's silence, a tense one, and then he just nods, short, sharp, all right. And walks away, and from that moment on, things are different. He stops being friendly, stops joking, stops including me in anything, and honestly I expected that. What I didn't expect was what came next, because over the next week small things start happening. Subtle but intentional, information not shared, updates I should have received never mentioned, meetings I wasn't told about. At first I think it's coincidence, maybe miscommunication, but then it becomes a pattern. And I realize he's cutting me out, deliberately, and that's when it really hits me. This isn't just someone slacking anymore. This is someone protecting their position by pushing me out of the picture. And now it's not just frustrating, it's a problem, a real one. At this point, it's not just uncomfortable anymore, it's strategic, and I can feel it, because the way Jason is acting now, it's not random, it's controlled, calculated, and honestly, a little unsettling. Because he's not confronting me directly, he's just shifting things around me, quietly, so that I start losing visibility. One of the first things I notice is that I'm suddenly out of the loop on a project, not completely, just partially, like I'm getting updates later than everyone else, or missing small details, and at first I assume it's just poor communication, so I ask him, hey, did anything change with the timeline? And he goes, oh yeah, we talked about it earlier. We talked about it, meaning him and others, without me, and I say I wasn't in that conversation, and he just shrugs. Oh, I thought you were busy, again, simple phrase, but it shifts responsibility, makes it sound like it's on me, not him, and I start seeing that pattern everywhere. Emails I'm not included in, decisions made without me, changes implemented, and I only find out after, and it's subtle enough that I can't easily call it out. Because technically nothing is wrong, but practically I'm being pushed out, slowly, and then it escalates. One afternoon my manager calls me into her office, nothing unusual, at least that's what I think, but the moment I sit down I can tell something's off. Her tone is different, more serious, and she says, I want to check in about your recent work. And immediately I feel it, that shift, because that's not how these conversations usually start, so I nod. Sure. And she continues, I've noticed some inconsistencies lately. Inconsistencies. That word lands because I know what she's referring to, but not in the way she thinks. She mentions a couple of projects, points out areas that felt incomplete or unclear, and I recognize them immediately. Those were the shared tasks, the ones where Jason's part slipped, but from her perspective it's all just one output. One result, one responsibility, and that responsibility includes me. And I try to explain, carefully, not blaming, just clarifying. I handled part of those, but some sections weren't mine, and she listens, but I can tell it's not fully convincing, because from her side it just sounds like deflection, and that's the worst part, because now his behavior is affecting my credibility, directly, and she says something that really sticks with me. I just want to make sure you're staying engaged, like I've checked out, like I'm the one pulling back. And I feel that frustration again, but I keep it controlled. I am, I say, and she nods, but it's not a confident nod, it's cautious. And that's when I realize this has gone too far, because now it's not just internal tension, it's external perception, and if I don't fix this, it's going to keep getting worse. After the meeting, I sit at my desk for a while, not working, just thinking, because up until now I've been trying to avoid conflict, trying to handle it quietly. Trying not to make it a thing, but that approach is failing. And not just failing, backfiring, because while I've been staying quiet, he's been shaping the narrative, and that realization changes everything, because now I understand something clearly. If I don't speak up, I'm going to be the one who takes the fall. After that meeting, I sit there for a while just staring at my screen, not really working, not really thinking about anything specific, just processing, because now everything is clear, painfully clear. Staying quiet isn't neutral, it's not keeping the peace. It's not being professional. It's losing slowly, and I've been letting it happen, so I make a decision, no more indirect handling, no more hopping it fixes itself. I'm going to make things visible, not dramatic, not emotional. Just clear. The next day we have another team check-in. Smaller meeting, nothing huge, but enough people are there. And more importantly, my manager is there. So when it comes time to go over progress, Jason starts talking. Same as usual, confident, smooth, walking through things like everything is under control, and I wait, I don't interrupt immediately, I let him go through a bit of it. And then when he reaches a part I worked on, I speak. Calm, measured. Just to clarify, I handled that section. No aggression, no accusation, just fact, and the room shifts slightly, not dramatically, but enough. Jason pauses just for a second, then smiles. Yeah, we worked on it together. Same line, again, and this time I don't let it slide. I completed that part, I say, still calm, still neutral, but firm, and now there's silence, because this is new. This isn't the dynamic they're used to, and my manager looks between us, not confused, but attentive, like she's starting to see something. Jason lets out a small laugh, tries to smooth it over. All right, fair enough, he says, and moves on, but it's different now because the moment happened, out loud, in front of people, and from that point on I keep doing it, not aggressively, not constantly, only when needed, but consistently. If I did something, I say it. If something isn't mine, I don't let it be grouped with me, and at first it's awkward, you can feel it. That slight tension in meetings, that shift in energy, but then something interesting happens. People start noticing, not because I'm calling him out, but because the pattern becomes visible. When credit is clear, so is responsibility, and Jason starts slipping. Maury obviously now, because I'm not covering anything, and I'm not silent anymore, and one afternoon it finally catches up to him. We're in a review meeting, going over a project that had issues, real issues this time. Not small, something that actually affected results. And my manager asks directly, what happened here? And for a second, Jason starts to speak, like he always does, confident, ready, but then he hesitates, just slightly, because now he knows. He knows I'm not going to stay quiet, and he glances at me, quick, like he's checking, and I just sit there, calm, waiting, and for the first time he doesn't take over the narrative. He says, we split the work. Careful, vague. And my manager nods, then looks at me. Can you walk me through your part? And I do, clearly, step by step, no emotion, just facts. And when I finish, she asks him the same, and that's where it breaks, because his explanation isn't solid, it's scattered, incomplete. You can tell he's filling gaps, and the difference is obvious to everyone. And in that moment, the entire dynamic shifts, because now it's not about perception anymore, it's about evidence. And for the first time, he doesn't look confident, he looks exposed. After that meeting, you can feel it, not just in the room, but in the way people interact afterward. That subtle shift, where something unspoken becomes understood. No one says it out loud, but everyone sees it because the difference was too clear, too obvious to ignore, and Jason knows it. You can tell, the confidence he usually has, it's not gone completely, but it's cracked, just enough. And over the next few days things change. Not instantly, but noticeably. My manager starts asking more direct questions, not in a confrontational way, just more precise. Who handled this part? Can you walk me through your process? Who finalized this section? And now there's no room to blur things, no space for vague answers, because every detail matters, and every answer reveals something. And Jason starts struggling, because without that ability to merge credit, to lean on my work quietly, he has to stand on his own, and it shows. Deadlines slip again, but this time they're noticed immediately. Mistakes don't get absorbed, they get addressed, and for the first time he's the one being questioned, directly, and I don't say anything extra. I don't push, I don't add pressure, I just do my work, clearly, individually, and let everything speak for itself. And then one afternoon he comes up to me, not in the open, not in front of anyone, just quietly. Hey, can we talk? And I already know what it's about, so we step aside. And for a second he doesn't say anything, just looks at me, trying to figure something out, and then he says, you didn't have to do that, and I tilt my head slightly. Do what? And he sighs like I'm playing dumb. Call things out like that in meetings, and I shake my head. I clarified my work, simple, because that's all I did, and he looks at me longer this time. And there's something in his expression now, not anger, not exactly, Maury-like frustration mixed with realization. Like he's starting to understand that the system he was using isn't working anymore, and he says, we could have handled that differently. We, again, that shared responsibility. Even now, and I respond calmly, I tried handling it differently. And that lands because it's true. I stayed quiet, I covered for him, I avoided conflict. And where did that get me? Right here, so there's silence, and then he nods slowly, not agreeing, not apologizing, just accepting something, and he says, all right, and walks away. And that's the last real conversation we have, because after that he pulls back, not aggressively, not dramatically, just less talking, less interaction, less everything. And within a couple of weeks the outcome becomes clear. He gets put on a performance review, nothing extreme, but serious enough, and from that point on, He either improves or he's out, and everyone knows it, and as for me, something else happens. My manager calls me in again, same office, same chair, but very different tone. I see what's been going on now, she says, and just like that, everything clicks into place. So when she says that, I see what's been going on now, there's this moment of relief. Not big, not dramatic, just quiet, because finally I don't have to explain everything from scratch, she already sees it. Continues, I've been reviewing some of the project histories, timelines, contributions. Careful wording, professional but clear, and I just nod, let her speak, and she says, you've been doing solid work, more than it looked like at first. That line sticks because it confirms something I've been feeling the whole time. It wasn't that I wasn't performing, it was that it wasn't visible, and now it is, and she adds, next time don't wait this long to speak up. And she's right. Completely right, because the whole situation could have been handled much earlier, much cleaner if I had just said something. But instead I tried to be easy to work with, tried to avoid tension, tried to handle it quietly, and that silence almost cost me. So I just say, yeah, I get that now. And she nods, conversation over. Simple, no drama, but meaningful. After that, things settle, not instantly, but steadily. Jason stays for a while longer. He actually improves a bit. Does his own work, keeps his head down. No more credit games, no more shifting. But at the same time, the dynamic is gone, completely. We're not friends anymore, not even close. We're just co-workers, and even that is distant. Minimal conversation, only what's necessary. And honestly, I'm fine with that, because at that point, trust is gone. And once that's gone, there's nothing to rebuild. Eventually, a couple months later, he leaves. I don't know if it was his choice or the company. And I didn't ask because it didn't matter anymore. The situation had already ended for me, long before that. And looking back, there are two things that really stand out. First, how easy it is to ignore red flags when you want to believe someone because all the signs were there, from the beginning, the job history, the excuses, the patterns. I just chose to see the best version of it. Second, how dangerous silence can be, because I thought staying quiet was the better option. More professional, less messy, but in reality it just gave him space to shape the story, and I almost got written out of it, and that's the part I won't forget. Sometimes being calm and easygoing isn't enough. Sometimes you actually have to speak up, even if it's uncomfortable, especially if it's uncomfortable. Because if you don't, someone else will speak for you, and they won't tell your version. All right, that one is way more real-life frustrating than anything else. Not dramatic, not explosive, just one of those slow situations where things keep building until suddenly it's a real problem. And honestly, the takeaway there is pretty simple. If something feels off early, it probably is. Anyway, for the next story, we're going in a slightly different direction again. This one starts off pretty normal, but turns into something unexpectedly intense. It's about a relationship where one small decision ended up revealing a much bigger issue underneath. Let's get into it. So this happened about 1.5 years ago, and it's one of those situations where at the time I genuinely thought I was doing the right thing. Like completely, no doubt, no hesitation. I thought I was being honest, mature, doing what people always say you should do, and somehow it still blew up in my face. I was in a relationship at the time. We'd been together for about 2 years, let's call her Emily, and overall things were good, not perfect obviously, but stable, comfortable. We didn't fight much, we got along, we had routines, the kind of relationship where you start thinking, okay, this might actually be long-term. We'd even talked about moving in together, not seriously planning it yet, but the idea was there, so everything felt solid, until this one moment, and the thing is, it wasn't even a big moment. That's what makes it so frustrating. It started with something small, a conversation, one of those random late-night talks where you're just talking about everything and nothing. We were sitting on the couch, half watching something, not really paying attention, and the topic shifted to past relationships. You know how that happens, no clear reason, it just comes up. And usually that kind of conversation is fine, a bit awkward maybe, but manageable. But this time, it went a little deeper. She started asking more specific questions. Not just how many people or how long, but details. How I felt, what went wrong, what I missed, that kind of stuff. And I answered, honestly. At least I thought I was just being honest. Because in my mind, that's what you're supposed to do, right? Be open, be transparent, don't hide things. So when she asked about my previous relationship, the one before her, I told her. I said it was intense. That we had a strong connection. That it ended badly, but it mattered a lot to me at the time. And she listened, quietly, no interruption, no reaction, just listening. And then she asked one more question, simple but very specific. Do you think you ever loved anyone more than me? And I remember pausing, because that's not a casual question. That's one of those questions where you already know the answer matters a lot, and in that moment, my brain goes 2 directions. One side says, just say no, keep it simple, protect the moment. The other side says, be honest, that's what matters long term. And I chose honesty, or at least what I thought was honesty. I said I think it was different, not more, just different. And the second I said it, I knew something shifted, and it wasn't dramatic at first. That's the thing, she didn't get angry, didn't raise her voice, didn't start a fight. She just went quiet, not fully silent, but quieter. And if you've ever been in a relationship long enough, you know there's a difference between calm and withdrawn. This was withdrawn, so I immediately tried to explain. I said, no, that's not what I mean. And she looked at me and said, then what do you mean? And that question felt way harder than it should have, because now I had to explain a feeling in real time to someone who was already hurt by the first version of it, so I tried. I said something like, I mean, every relationship is different. Different timing, different intensity, different dynamics. What I have with you feels more stable and real. And even while I was saying it, I could hear the problem. Because stable and real sounds good in theory, but in that moment, it didn't sound romantic. It sounded like a downgrade. Like I was saying, yeah, I used to feel something bigger and messier, but with you it's calmer. And that is not what anyone wants to hear. Especially not after asking if they're the person you loved most. She nodded slowly, too slowly, and said, okay, just okay. And I knew that okay didn't mean okay. It meant the conversation was technically over, but emotionally it had just started. For the rest of the night, things felt off. We stayed on the couch for a bit longer. The show kept playing. Neither of us was watching it. We both knew that. And eventually she said she was tired and went to bed early. No kiss. No usual goodnight routine, just distance. And I sat there by myself, replaying the conversation in my head, trying to figure out if I'd actually said something wrong or if it just came out badly. Because in my mind, what I meant was reasonable. I wasn't saying I love someone else more in some current, ongoing way. I was trying to say that different relationships feel different, that some are intense because they're unhealthy, that some are calmer because they're secure. That more intense doesn't always mean better, but I hadn't said it that clearly. I'd said the version people say when they think honesty alone is enough, and sometimes it is. The next morning she was polite, which somehow felt worse. Not cold, not rude, just careful, like she was editing herself, and that's when I really started to worry. Because anger at least gives you something to respond to. Distance just sits there. So over breakfast, I tried again. I said about last night, and she immediately said, it's fine. Again, fine, another word that almost never means what it says. I told her I didn't want it to just sit there weirdly between us. And she sighed a little and said, I asked you a question and you answered honestly. I'm not mad. But she didn't say she wasn't hurt, and I could hear that gap. So I asked, are you hurt? And she took a second before answering, not because she didn't know, but because she was deciding how much to say. Then she said, I don't know, I just didn't expect that answer. And I nodded, which felt useless, because what do you even do with that? You can't unsay something like that. You can reframe it, clarify it, apologize for how it came out, but the original answer, it stays. And I think that's what started bothering me most. Not that we had a difficult conversation, but that I could feel something changing in how she saw me. Like before that moment, I existed in a certain emotional position in her mind. Safe, certain, chosen, and now there was doubt in that space. And once doubt gets in, it doesn't just disappear because you explain yourself better the next day. Over the following week, nothing exploded. No huge fight, no dramatic confrontation, just little changes. She texted a little less, took longer to respond, seemed distracted when we were together. And every time I asked if everything was okay, she'd say yes, but not in a convincing way. More like someone trying not to start something. And I made the mistake a lot of people make in that situation. I kept trying to fix it without really understanding what needed fixing. I got more affectionate, more reassuring, tried to be extra present, which sounds like the right move, but when someone is already pulling away, too much effort too suddenly can feel less like comfort and more like damage control. And I think she felt that, because one night after I'd gone out of my way to plan dinner and make things feel normal, she looked at me across the table and said, you don't have to perform. Perform, that word landed hard because from my side I was trying, from her side I was reacting. And maybe she was right. After she said that, you don't have to perform, there's this silence. Not awkward exactly, but heavy, like something important just got acknowledged. And now there's no way to pretend it didn't. So I sit back a little and I say, I'm not trying to perform, I'm trying to fix this. And she looks at me for a second, then shakes her head slightly. That's the problem, she says, and I don't fully understand what she means. So I ask, what do you mean? And she takes a breath, like she's deciding how honest she wants to be. And then she says, I don't want you to fix it, I want to understand it. And that sounds simple. But it's not, because now we're not talking about behavior anymore. We're talking about how she interpreted what I said, how it made her feel, and that's harder, so I nod. Okay, what are you trying to understand? And she looks down at the table for a second, then back at me. I'm trying to understand where I actually stand for you, and that hits. Because I thought that was already clear. 2 years together, talking about the future, all of that, but now apparently it's not. So I say, you're my partner, you're the person I see a future with. And she nods, but again, it's not a satisfied nod. It's like she's hearing the words but not feeling convinced by them. And then she says something that really reframes everything. When I asked that question, I wasn't asking about logic, and I pause because that's exactly how I answered, logically. Carefully trying to be accurate, and she continues, I was asking how you feel. And there it is, that gap between what I said and what she needed to hear. Because from my perspective, I gave a thoughtful, nuanced answer. From her perspective, I avoided saying she was the most important, and those are not the same thing, so I try again. I do love you, and what we have matters more to me now than anything I've had before. And she listens, really listens this time. But then she says that's not the same as what I asked. And she's right, it's not, and I realize I've been trying to rephrase my answer instead of addressing the core issue, which is simple, painfully simple. She wanted to know if she was the person I loved the most, and I didn't say yes, and no amount of explanation changes that initial moment. So I say I didn't answer it the way you needed, and she nods, slowly, and for a second it feels like we're actually getting somewhere. Like maybe we can resolve this, but then she adds, and now I don't know if I believe anything you say about it. And that hits harder than anything else, because now it's not just about the answer, it's about trust. And once trust gets pulled into something like this, everything gets more complicated. Because even if I say exactly what she wants to hear now, it can feel like I'm just saying it to fix things, not because it's real. And she says it out loud. If you say yes now. I don't know if it's because it's true, or because you know it's what I want to hear. And I don't have a clean response to that, because she's right. There's no way to separate those two anymore, not completely. So I sit there for a moment, trying to find something honest that doesn't make things worse, and I say, I wish I had answered differently. And she looks at me not angry, just tired. Yeah, she says, me too, and that's the moment I realize. This isn't a simple misunderstanding anymore. It's something that changed how she sees me, and I don't know if I can change it back. After that conversation, things don't explode. And honestly, I think that would have been easier. A fight gives you something clear, a big moment, a release, but this wasn't that. This was quieter, slower, like something had cracked, and now the whole relationship was holding together differently. Not broken, not yet, but strained, and you could feel it in everything. The next couple of weeks we still saw each other, still texted, still went through the motions of being together, but that natural ease we used to have, it was gone. Before, being around each other had felt effortless, comfortable. Now it felt careful, like every conversation had a second layer under it, like we were both listening for something else. Me listening for signs that things were getting better. Her maybe listening for proof that what I said meant more than I intended it to. And that's a brutal place to live emotionally, because once a relationship becomes interpretive like that, nothing feels simple anymore. One night we were out with friends, a completely normal evening, nothing serious. Everyone was laughing, talking, telling stories, and I remember noticing that she was smiling, participating, totally fine on the surface, but every now and then she'd go quiet, just for a few seconds, like she drifted somewhere else, and maybe no one else would have noticed. But I did, because I was watching for it now, always, and later on the way home I asked, "Are you okay?" And she said yes, again that same yes, that same version of yes that really means I don't want to do this right now. So I let it go, at least for that night, but that became the pattern. Every time I tried to check in, she'd give just enough to keep the conversation from becoming a confrontation. Not dismissive, not cold, just contained. And I think what made it worse was that she wasn't doing anything obviously wrong. She wasn't lashing out, wasn't punishing me, wasn't trying to make me feel bad. She was just less open, less emotionally available. And it's hard to argue with that, because technically someone is allowed to pull back when they're hurt, even if that hurts you too. So I started overthinking everything. Every pause, every delayed reply, every slight shift in tone. I'd reread texts trying to figure out whether she sounded distant, or whether I was just scared she was, and that's exhausting. Because once you start monitoring a relationship like that, you stop actually living in it. You start managing it, trying to predict it, trying to prevent the next emotional drop before it happens. And one night that pressure finally came out. We were at my place, just sitting in the kitchen after dinner. Nothing dramatic, nothing tense, at least not on the surface. And I asked her, probably for the 5th or 6th time in some form, "Are we okay?" And she didn't answer right away. She just looked at me, and I could tell from her face she was tired of that question, not because it was unfair, but because she didn't have an answer that would make either of us feel better. Then she said, "I don't know." And that was worse than any argument could have been, because I don't know means there's no ground to stand on, no certainty, no direction, just drift. So I asked, do you still want this? And again, she took too long to answer. And when she finally did, she said, I think I do, I just don't feel as secure as I used to. Secure, that word mattered, because that's what had been damaged. Not love exactly, not yet, but security. Her sense that she was fully chosen, fully safe in how I felt about her. And once that gets shaken, everything else starts feeling less stable too. I told her I understood, but honestly, I only understood it intellectually. Emotionally, I was frustrated, because part of me kept thinking, I answered one question badly, that can't be all this is. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just the answer. It was what the answer revealed, or seemed to reveal. And once someone believes they've seen a truth underneath your words, it's really hard to convince them they didn't. A few days after that, we end up having another conversation. Not planned, not scheduled, just one of those moments where you both know it's coming. We're at her place this time, sitting on opposite sides of the couch, not far but not close either, and there's this quiet stretch where neither of us says anything, and then she finally speaks. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I nod, because of course she has, so have I, and she continues. I keep trying to move past it, but it doesn't really go away, and I can hear it in her voice, not anger, not even frustration, just wait. Like she's been carrying this around in her head non-stop. So I ask, what part of it is sticking with you? And she looks at me for a second like she's deciding how direct to be, and then she says, it's not just what you said, and I feel a small shift inside, because that matters. That means it's deeper than one sentence, and she explains, it's how easily you said it. And that catches me off guard, because from my perspective, that moment felt heavy, important. But from her perspective, it didn't look that way. And she continues, you didn't hesitate like someone who was choosing their words carefully, you just answered. And I start to respond, to explain that I did think about it, that I was trying to be honest, but she keeps going. And I think that's what bothered me. She pauses, then adds quietly, it felt like you already knew. And that's the part that really lands, because now it's not just about the answer. It's about what she believes that answer represents, that I had already decided, somewhere in my mind, that she wasn't the person I felt the most for. And that belief is hard to undo, so I say, I didn't mean it like that. And she nods, I know you didn't mean to hurt me. But then she adds, that doesn't change how it felt. And there it is again, that gap between intention and impact, and I realize something in that moment. I've been trying to fix this by explaining my intention, but she's stuck on the impact, and those two things don't cancel each other out, so I ask, what would have felt different? And she thinks for a second, then says, if you had paused, if you had taken time, if it felt like the answer mattered more. And I sit with that, because she's not asking for a different truth. She's asking for a different weight, a different emotional response, something that showed she was at the center of that question, and I didn't give her that. I gave her something measured, balanced, neutral, and neutral doesn't feel like love in that kind of moment, so I say I understand that now. And she looks at me and I can tell she believes that, but it still doesn't fix it. And then she says something that honestly makes everything heavier. I think before that. Assumed I was your person, that idea, that feeling of being the one in someone's life, not logically, but emotionally. And she continues, now I don't know if I am. And that's when it becomes really clear. This isn't about a sentence anymore, it's about identity inside the relationship, how she sees herself in it. And that's not something you can repair quickly, because it's not just a misunderstanding, it's a shift in belief. And I say you are, but even as I say it, I know it doesn't land the same, because now it sounds like reassurance, not certainty. And she hears that difference, even if she doesn't say it out loud. And we sit there in silence again, longer this time, and I realize something uncomfortable. I can keep explaining, keep trying to reframe, keep saying the right things, but unless she feels it again, none of that will matter. And right now she doesn't. After that night, things get quieter, and not in a peaceful way, Maury-like. The emotional volume of the relationship drops. Less warmth, less spontaneity, less of that natural instinct to reach for each other. And that's the part people don't really talk about. When relationships start breaking down, it's not always loud. Sometimes it's just less texting first, less random affection, less sharing little things throughout the day, less us. At first I try not to panic. I tell myself maybe she just needs time. Maybe this is one of those things that settles if you stop pressing on it. So I back off a little, not in a cold way, just less chasing. Less checking in every 5 minutes to see if we're okay, because I can tell that isn't helping, and for a short while it almost feels better. Not good, but smoother, less openly tense. We still see each other, still have dinner, still sleep in the same bed sometimes, still talk about normal things, work, friends, what show we're watching, weekend plans. And if you looked at us from the outside, you'd probably think things were fine, maybe just a little off, nothing serious. But from the inside, I could feel it, that difference, that missing layer. Before, when we were together, there was this sense of ease, like we were both fully there. Now it felt like part of her was always somewhere else, not physically, emotionally, like she was present enough to be kind, but not fully open anymore. And once you notice that, you notice it everywhere. The way she'd pull away just a little sooner after hugging me. The way her replies became shorter when we were apart. The way she stopped asking follow-up questions when I talked about things. Not rude, not dramatic, just a little less invested. And I hated how quickly I became aware of every tiny change, because once that happens, you start measuring everything. You stop experiencing the relationship naturally. You start tracking it, comparing the current version to the old one, and the comparison is brutal. One Friday night, we had plans to go out with a couple of friends. Nothing huge. Just dinner and drinks. Normally, she'd be excited for that kind of thing. She liked our little social routines. But that evening, she seemed distracted from the moment she arrived. Not upset, just distant. And during dinner, one of our friends made a joke about me being the stable one in the relationship. Just harmless, casual teasing. The kind of thing people say without thinking. And everyone laughed, including me, but Emily didn't. She smiled politely, but that was it. And for some reason, that tiny moment stayed with me, because it reminded me of exactly how I'd tried to describe us. Stable, real, secure. All those words I thought sounded mature, and suddenly they felt empty, or worse, insufficient, like I'd built this whole explanation around qualities that were objectively good without realizing that good doesn't always feel deeply loved. Later that night, after we got back to her place, I asked if she was okay, and she said, yeah, just tired. But I could tell it wasn't just that, so I let a little silence sit between us and then said, you've been somewhere else lately. And she looked at me for a second, not defensive, just sad, and then she said, I think I'm trying not to need reassurance from you all the time. That sentence hit me harder than I expected, because on the surface it sounds reasonable, healthy even, but underneath it there was something painful. What she was really saying was, I don't trust the reassurance the same way anymore. And I asked, do you feel like you need reassurance all the time? And she gave this small shrug, not careless, just tired. I didn't before, and that was it. That was the whole thing. Before she didn't need it, before she just felt secure. Now she was managing uncertainty, quietly, constantly, and I realized that what I'd broken wasn't just a moment, it was the default, the baseline. The place she used to stand emotionally without questioning it. Now everything had to be checked, measured, interpreted, and that kind of relationship gets exhausting fast, for both people. After that, I started noticing she was protecting herself more openly, not with words, with behavior. She'd leave a little earlier, answer a little later, say she was tired when normally she'd stay over, small retreats, nothing you can accuse someone of, but enough to feel. And I remember lying awake one night after she left, staring at the ceiling, thinking something I didn't want to admit, that maybe this wasn't a phase, maybe this wasn't us working through something. Maybe this was the beginning of the end, and we were both just moving toward it slowly because neither of us wanted to say it first. It happens a few days later. Nothing dramatic leads up to it. No fight, no big trigger. Just one of those quiet evenings where everything feels a little too still. We're at my place this time, sitting in the living room, not watching anything, not really talking either, just existing in the same space. And I think that's what does it, because sometimes silence makes things clearer than any argument, so I say it, not aggressively, not emotionally. Just honestly, I feel like I'm losing you, and she doesn't react right away. She just looks at me, and there's something in her expression that I haven't seen before, not anger, not sadness, something more settled. Like she's already been thinking the same thing, and she says, I think you already did, a little bit. And that lands quietly, but heavily, because it confirms everything I've been feeling, all those small changes, all that distance. It wasn't in my head, so I ask, can we fix it? And I mean that, not in a desperate way, just sincerely, and she takes a breath. Slow, careful, like she's choosing her words one last time. I don't know if it's something you fix, she says. And I feel that immediately, because that's not a yes. That's not even a maybe. That's uncertainty with weight behind it, so I press a little. What do you mean? And she looks down for a second, then back at me. I think something changed for me, and I don't know how to go back to how it felt before. There it is, clear, no confusion, no mixed signals, just truth. And I sit there for a moment, trying to accept that, because part of me still wants to argue, to explain. To convince her that feelings can come back, that one moment doesn't define everything. But another part of me knows she's not wrong, because I've felt it too, that difference, that missing ease. So I ask, do you still want to try? And she hesitates, not long, but long enough. And then she says, I think I've been trying, past tense, not I want to try. I've been trying, and that distinction is everything, because it means this isn't a decision she's making right now. It's something she's already been working through, quietly, without me fully realizing, and I ask one more question, the one I already know the answer to. Do you feel the same about me? And she looks at me, really looks this time, and says, I care about you a lot. And that's when I know, because that's not the same as love, not the way it was before, and not the way I needed to hear it, and I don't push further because there's no point. You can't argue someone into feeling something. You can't logic your way back into being the person they saw you as before. And for the first time in this whole situation, I stop trying to fix it. I just sit there and let it be what it is. And after a few minutes, she says, I think we both know where this is going. And I nod, because we've known for a while, we just didn't want to say it. And sometimes that's the hardest part, not the ending itself, but admitting that it's already happening. We don't break up in some dramatic way. No raised voices, no final argument, no big emotional moment. It's quieter than that. We sit there for a while after that conversation, not talking much, just being in the same space. Knowing, and eventually she says she's going to head home. No tension, no anger, just acceptance. I walk her to the door, we hug, a normal hug, but not really, because you can feel the difference. It lingers for a second. Like both of us know this might be the last time it feels like this. And then she pulls away, says, I'll text you, and I nod, and that's it. No, I love you. Not this time. She leaves, the door closes, and the apartment goes quiet, and I just stand there for a moment, looking at nothing in particular, trying to process how something that felt so stable can change so quickly, over something that didn't seem that big at the time. The next few days, we don't talk much. A couple of short messages, nothing deep, nothing emotional, just space. And then eventually we have one last conversation. Short, clear, no confusion. We both agree that it's better to end it, not because we hate each other, not because something huge happened, but because something important changed and neither of us could get it back. And that's how it ends, clean but not easy. And for a while after, I keep thinking about that moment, that question, that answer, over and over again. Trying to figure out if I could have said it differently, if I should have just said what she wanted to hear, if honesty was the right choice or just the wrong timing. And the truth is, I still don't fully know. Because on one hand, I don't think lying would have been better long term. But on the other, there are moments in relationships where the emotional meaning matters more than the technical truth. Where someone isn't asking for a perfect answer, they're asking for reassurance. And I missed that completely. I answered the question, but not the feeling behind it. And that's the part that stuck with me. Not that I was honest, but that I wasn't emotionally aware enough in that moment. Because sometimes being technically right isn't the same as being right for the relationship. And once something like that shifts, once someone starts questioning their place in your life, it's really hard to restore that certainty. Not impossible, but not easy. And we didn't make it back, and that's where this one ends. Just two people who probably could have worked long term if one small moment had gone a little differently. All right, that one is honestly just rough, not dramatic, not explosive, just one of those situations where everything feels fine, until one small moment changes how someone sees you. And once that shift happens, it's really hard to undo. Anyway, for the next story, we're going back to something a bit more chaotic. This one involves a situation that starts off as a favor and turns into something way more complicated than it should have been. Let's get into it. So this happened last summer, and it started as one of those really simple situations. Like genuinely simple, the kind of favor you don't even think twice about. And somehow it turned into something way bigger than it should have been. So I live in a small apartment building, nothing fancy. Just a quiet place where most people keep to themselves. You see your neighbors occasionally, say hi in the hallway, but that's about it. One of my neighbors, let's call her Laura, lived a couple doors down. We weren't close, but we were friendly. The kind of we've had a few short conversations, exchanged names, that's it type of friendly. She seemed nice, normal, no red flags. And one day I run into her in the hallway. She looks a little stressed, not panicked, just rushed. And she says, hey, quick question, are you going to be around this weekend? And I already kind of know where this is going. But I say, yeah, why? And she explains that she has to leave town suddenly. Family thing, doesn't go into detail, just says it's important. And then she asks if I could watch her dog, just for the weekend, Friday to Sunday, simple. And I hesitate for maybe 2 seconds, because again this sounds like nothing. It's a dog, 2 days, feed it, maybe walk it a couple times, that's it. And she even adds, he's super easy, doesn't need much. Of course they always say that, but at the time I believed her, so I said yes. That was mistake number 1. She thanks me a lot, like a lot, which should have been a hint, but I didn't think much of it. I just figured she was stressed and grateful. So Friday comes. She knocks on my door in the morning. Dog with her, small to medium-sized, nothing intimidating, looks calm. quiet, and she gives me a quick rundown. Food is in a bag, feed him twice a day, take him out a couple times. He mostly just sleeps, she says, mostly just sleeps. I nod, sounds manageable. Then she hands me the leash and leaves, just like that. No extra instructions, no long explanation, just gone, and I stand there with this dog, who is now looking at me like, all right, what now? And for the first hour or so, everything is fine. The dog just kind of walks around my apartment, sniffs everything, then settles down near the couch. Quiet, calm, exactly like she said, and I remember thinking, okay, this is easy. Famous last thought, because that calm didn't last very long. So for the first hour, everything is exactly as expected. The dog just kind of exists. Walks around a bit, sniffs the corners, checks the doors, then settles down near the couch like he's done this 100 times before. Quiet, calm, almost too calm, and I remember thinking, all right, easiest favor ever. I even text Laura, hey, everything's good here. And she replies almost immediately, thank you again. He's super chill, smiling face with smiling eyes. That message will become very ironic later. So around early afternoon, I decide to take him out for a walk. Nothing complicated, just leash, shoes, keys done. We step outside, and for the first few seconds everything is normal. He walks beside me. No pulling, no weird behavior, just a regular dog until we get about halfway down the street. And then something changes, not dramatically, just suddenly. He stops completely, no warning, just plants himself in place, and I give the leash a slight tug. Come on, nothing, doesn't move, doesn't react, just stands there. So I wait a second, maybe he's distracted. Maybe he smelled something, totally normal, but then he sits down, slowly, deliberately, and now I'm standing there in the middle of the sidewalk with a dog that has decided he is done. Just done, so I try again, a little more encouragement this time. Come on, let's go. Nothing, no movement, no reaction, just sitting, and I'm starting to feel a little awkward because people are walking past, looking at me, looking at the dog. That kind of look like, why is that guy arguing with a dog? So I crouch down a bit, try to get his attention, clap lightly, still nothing. He just looks at me, calm, unbothered, like he's completely in control of this situation. And I realize something, this dog is not confused, he's choosing this, so now I have a decision, wait it out or try to move him. So I gently try to guide him up, not pulling hard, just encouraging. And the second I apply a bit more pressure on the leash, he flops. Just completely drops onto the ground, on his side. Like he's just turned into dead weight, and I just stand there, staring at him, because now I'm in a situation where I either drag a dog down the sidewalk or I just stand there with him, and neither option feels great, so I let go of the leash tension, and immediately he relaxes, like nothing happened, still laying there, perfectly fine. And that's when it hits me, this isn't random behavior, this is trained, or at least learned. He knows exactly what he's doing, so I try something else. I start walking away slightly, just a few steps, and for a moment nothing happens. Then he gets up, casually, and walks after me, like the last 5 minutes didn't happen, and I just look at him like, are you serious? But okay, fine, we keep walking. And for the rest of the walk, he's mostly normal again. A little slower than before, but manageable. So we get back to my apartment, and I'm thinking, all right, that was weird, but not a big deal. Still manageable, still easy. Still a simple weekend favor, right? That thought lasts maybe 2 hours, because later that evening things get a lot more complicated. So later that evening I feed him, no problem, he eats normally, drinks water, walks around a little, then settles near the door, and at first I don't think much of it. Dogs do that sometimes, they pick a spot and just hang out there, but after a while I notice he's still there, not sleeping, not relaxing, just sitting, facing the door completely still, like he's waiting. So I go about my evening, make food, clean up, put something on TV, and every now and then I glance over, same position, same stillness, still looking at the door, and that's when I start wondering, okay, maybe he misses her, which makes sense. New place, different person, routine disrupted, totally understandable, so I try to make things comfortable. I talk to him a bit, move his bed closer, even put one of my blankets nearby in case he wants something softer to lie on. Nothing. He stays right there by the door, and then around maybe 10 p.m. he starts whining. Soft at first, barely noticeable, just little sounds. The kind you'd assume would stop in a minute, but they don't. They get louder, not full barking. Not yet, just this repetitive, restless whining that slowly starts filling the apartment. And it's one of those sounds that gets under your skin fast. Because it's not loud enough to be dramatic, but it is constant enough that you can't ignore it. So I take him outside again. Maybe he needs another walk, maybe bathroom. Maybe he's anxious and movement will help. And for a little while it seems like that might work. He walks, sniffs around, does his thing. No drama. So we come back upstairs, and within maybe 3 minutes, he's back by the door, and the whining starts again. At this point I text Laura, just casual. Hey, he seems a little anxious. Is that normal? And she doesn't answer, which fine, she's out of town, maybe busy, maybe driving, whatever, so I keep trying. I sit on the floor near him for a while, pet him, talk to him, try to get him to settle somewhere other than directly in front of the door. Nothing really works. If he leaves the spot, it's only for a minute, then right back. And now I'm starting to realize something. This dog is not just mildly uncomfortable. He is waiting for her, actively, with full commitment, and I'm not part of the plan. Around midnight, the whining turns into barking. Short bursts at first, 1 or 2 barks, pause, then again, and now I'm officially stressed, because I live in an apartment building. Thin walls, quiet neighbors. This is not a place where a dog can just decide to become nocturnal. So I do what everyone does when they're stuck with a dog that isn't theirs and a problem they didn't expect. I start improvising, I try treats. I try turning off the lights and keeping things quiet. I try sitting near the door with him. I even put on soft background noise like maybe the silence is making it worse. Nothing. Every few minutes, whine, bark, and the energy is changing too. He's packing now. Door to couch, couch to kitchen, kitchen back to door, like he can't settle for more than a few seconds. And somewhere around 1 a.m., I get that sinking feeling. One where you realize this isn't going to be one bad hour. This is going to be the whole night. So I text Laura again, this time a little less casual. Hey, he's really upset and won't settle. Do you have any advice? Still no answer. And that's when I start getting annoyed. Because if your dog has some kind of serious separation issue that is something you mentioned before handing him to someone for the weekend, that is not a fun little surprise. Around 2 a.m., he finally quiets down. Not because he calms down, because he exhausts himself. He curls up by the door and falls asleep there. And I sit on my couch in complete silence, staring at him with that drained feeling you get after dealing with a problem for hours that shouldn't have been your problem in the first place. And I remember thinking, okay, whatever, one bad night, we'll get through tomorrow. Except tomorrow ends up being way worse. I wake up exhausted, not just a little tired, properly drained. That kind of sleep where you never fully rest. Just wake up over and over again, waiting for the next noise. And the first thing I notice is that it's quiet, completely quiet, and for a second I feel relieved. Like maybe last night was just a one-off, maybe he adjusted, maybe today will be easier. So I sit up, look over toward the door, and he's still there. Same spot, curled up, sleeping. Exactly where he was when I finally fell asleep, so I get up slowly. Trying not to wake him, go to the kitchen, start making coffee. And for about 5 minutes everything feels normal, peaceful even, and then I hear it. A low sound, not barking, not whining. More like a quiet growl, and I freeze for a second because that's new. That definitely wasn't happening last night. So I turn slowly and look toward the door, and he's awake now, not fully up, still lying there, but his head is lifted and he's looking straight at me. And that growl is coming from him, low, steady, not aggressive exactly, but not friendly either, just warning, and I stay still. Because now I'm thinking, okay, what is this? I haven't done anything, I'm just standing in my own kitchen, so I speak softly. Hey, it's okay, and he stops for a second. The growling fades, but he doesn't relax, he just keeps looking at me. Alert, focused, like he's trying to figure something out, and I realize something in that moment. Last night he wasn't interacting with me much. He was focused on the door, on waiting. Now he's noticing me, and not in a good way, so I move slowly. No sudden movements, just normal, calm behavior, trying not to escalate anything. And after a few seconds he gets up, stretches, walks over toward me, and I tense up a little, not outwardly, but internally, because I don't know what to expect now. But then he just walks past me, like nothing happened. Goes to the water bowl, starts drinking, and I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. Okay, fine, maybe that was just confusion, maybe he just woke up disoriented. That happens, I try to shake it off, keep the morning moving, feed him, get ready, take him out for a walk. And at first the walk is normal. Actually better than yesterday, no random stopping, no dramatic flopping, just walking, calm, controlled, and I start thinking, all right. Maybe yesterday was just stress from being in a new place. Maybe today he'll settle. Maybe tonight will be easier. Again, wrong, because when we get back and I open the door, everything changes. Immediately, the second we step inside, he bolts, not aggressively, but fast, straight into the living room and starts packing, back and forth, faster than before, more intense. And then he runs to the door again, starts whining, but this time it's louder, more urgent. And I can see it clearly now. This isn't just anxiety, this is full separation distress. Like he genuinely cannot handle being away from her, and I'm suddenly realizing I've been left alone with a dog that was never prepared to be without its owner. At all, and I text Laura again, this time not even trying to sound casual. Hey, I really need you to respond, he's not okay. And this time she finally answers, after hours, and what she says makes everything worse. So she finally replies, after hours, and I'm standing there in my apartment with a dog packing like he's about to lose his mind, reading her message. And it says, "Oh yeah, he gets a bit anxious when I'm gone. He'll settle eventually. A bit anxious," that's how she describes this. And I just stare at my phone for a second, because what I'm dealing with right now is not a bit anxious. This is a dog that didn't sleep properly, cried and barked half the night, is now packing like he's trying to escape, and just growled at me this morning. That's not minor. That's something you warn someone about before they agree. So I text back, "This is more than anxious. He's not settling at all." And there's a delay again, of course, and meanwhile he's getting worse. The packing turns into scratching. At the door, constant, rapid, like he's trying to dig through it. And now I'm stressed for multiple reasons. The noise, the potential damage, the neighbors, and the fact that I clearly don't know how to handle this, so I try to redirect him. Call him over, offer food, offer treats, nothing. He's locked in, focused on one thing, getting out or getting her back, and I realize something else too. He's not bonding with me at all, not even a little. I'm not temporary comfort. I'm just not her, and that makes me irrelevant. Then my phone buzzes again. Her reply, "Yeah, he can be a bit intense the first couple days. Just ignore it and he'll calm down." Ignore it. I actually laugh a little when I read that, not because it's funny, because it's so disconnected from reality. You can't ignore a dog that's actively losing it in a small apartment. That's not how this works, so I send another message, this time more direct. "Did you know he reacts like this when you leave?" And there's a longer pause this time, and when she finally replies. Short, "Yeah, he's always been like that." And that's it, no apology, no warning, no "I should have told you." Just confirmation, and something in me just snaps into clarity. Because now I understand the situation completely. She knew exactly how he behaves. She knew this wasn't a super easy weekend dog, and she still handed him off like it was nothing. And now I'm stuck dealing with the consequences. And I type out a response, then delete it, because I know. Getting into an argument right now doesn't help me. I still have the dog, I still have at least another day. So instead I ask, is there anything specific that helps calm him down? And she replies, he just needs time. Of course, time, that vague answer that basically means you're on your own. And that's when I realize I have to figure this out myself, because she's not going to help. So I start adapting. I move his food closer to the door, bring water there, sit near him again. Try to at least reduce the packing. And after a while, he does slow down a bit. Not calm, but less frantic. Enough that the apartment isn't echoing with constant noise. And I sit there on the floor next to a dog that clearly doesn't want me there, thinking, this is not what I agreed to. This wasn't a favor anymore. This was a full responsibility that I was never prepared for, and the worst part, it still wasn't the peak of it, because later that day, something happens that takes this from stressful to genuinely out of control. So by the afternoon, I've managed to get things somewhat under control. Not calm, not normal, but manageable. The packing slows down, the whining drops from constant to occasional, and he's mostly staying near the door again, still fixated, but not in full panic mode anymore, and I'm exhausted, mentally more than anything. Because dealing with that kind of energy for hours, it drains you. So I decide to try something simple. I'm going to step out for literally 5 minutes, just to grab something from the store downstairs, nothing complicated, in and out, and I hesitate for a second, because part of me already knows this might not go well, but I think, okay, he's calmer now, it'll be fine. So I grab my keys, put on my shoes, and the moment I reach for the door, he's up, immediately, like a switch flipped, and I can see it in his body language, the tension. The alertness, the anticipation, so I pause, turn to him. It's okay, I'll be right back. And I don't know why I say that, like he understands, like that matters. Because the second I open the door, he lunges, not at me, past me, straight for the hallway, and I barely catch the leash in time. And now we're both standing there, half in the apartment, half out, with him pulling forward like he's trying to escape. And it's not aggressive, it's desperate. Like he genuinely thinks this is his chance to get back to her. So I pull him back inside, close the door quickly. Heart racing a bit now, because that could have gone really badly. If I hadn't reacted fast, he would have been gone, and I stand there for a second just breathing, realizing something important. I cannot leave him alone. At all, not even for a few minutes, so I give up on that idea, sit back down, try to settle him again. And after a while, he calms down, a little, but now I'm stuck because I can't go out, I can't relax. And I definitely can't sleep later if this keeps repeating. And then around early evening, it happens, the thing that pushes everything over the edge. He's been quiet for maybe 20 minutes, just lying by the door, still alert but not moving much, and I think, okay, maybe we're stabilizing. So I go to the kitchen, start making something quick to eat, nothing fancy, just trying to keep things normal, and then I hear it, a sudden, sharp sound, like something falling or breaking. And I turn around immediately. and he's not by the door anymore. He's in the living room near the shelf, and one of the items on it is now on the floor, broken, and I step closer slowly, trying to understand what just happened, and he looks at me, not guilty, not scared, just alert, like he's waiting. And I realize something almost instantly. He didn't knock it over by accident. He jumped. He went up there on purpose, and I look at the shelf, and then I see it. My keys, they're not on the table anymore. They're on the floor, right next to the broken item, and everything clicks at once. He wasn't just packing. He was trying to reach the door, trying to get anything associated with it. Keys, exit, escape, and in the process, he knocked something over. And now I've got a stressed dog, a broken item, no ability to leave, in a situation that is clearly getting worse, and I just stand there in the middle of my apartment, thinking this is completely out of control now. At this point, I'm done pretending this is manageable, because now it's not just stressful, it's affecting my space, my time, my responsibility, and I was never supposed to be dealing with something at this level. So I take a breath, pick up my phone, and I call her, not text, call, because this is no longer something you handle through delayed messages. She answers after a few rings, and right away she sounds normal, calm. Like everything is fine on her end. Hey, and that almost makes it worse, because I'm standing in my apartment with a broken item on the floor, a dog packing behind me, and she sounds like she's having a regular day. So I don't ease into it, I just say, this isn't working. And there's a pause, not long, but noticeable. What do you mean? She asks, and I explain. Everything, the packing, the barking, the night, the growling. The fact that I can't even leave the apartment for 5 minutes. The broken item, all of it, and I keep my voice controlled. Not yelling, not emotional. Just clear, because at this point I don't need to vent, I need a solution, and when I finish there's silence on the other end. Then she says, yeah, he can be a bit much. A bit much, again, that same minimization. And something in me just tightens, because this isn't new information to her. She knows exactly how he behaves. And she chose not to tell me, so I say it directly. You knew he was like this. Not a question, a statement, and she hesitates just slightly, then says, I didn't think it would be that bad. And that's when I stop trying to be understanding, because that's not an answer, that's avoidance. So I respond, you told me he was easy, and she doesn't deny it. She just says, I thought he'd be okay for a couple days. Thought, again, everything framed like it's uncertainty. Clearly is, so I take a breath and say, I can't do another night like this. And that's the line, that's where the conversation shifts, because now it's not about explaining the situation, it's about what happens next. And she says, well, I can't come back early. Of course she can't, and I ask, do you have anyone else who can take him? And there's another pause, longer this time. Then she says, not really, and now I'm stuck because I don't want to abandon the dog. It's not his fault, but I also didn't agree to this. So I say, I need another option, this isn't sustainable. And finally, for the first time, her tone changes a little, less casual, more serious. Okay, let me think. And she hangs up, and I stand there in the middle of my apartment, waiting, and the dog is still packing, still restless, still not okay. And after about 20 minutes she calls back, and she says, there's a boarding place nearby. I can call them and cover the cost. And that's the first practical solution I've heard this entire time. So I say, do that. No hesitation, and she agrees. And suddenly there's a path out of this. Not ideal, not what I signed up for, but at least it's an end. And that night I get him into the car, drive him to the place, hand him over. And the moment I walk out, I feel it, that immediate drop in tension, like my whole body finally relaxes. Because for the first time in 2 days, I'm not managing chaos, I'm just existing again. So after I drop him off, I get back to my apartment. And the first thing I notice is the silence, not just quiet, actual silence. No packing, no whining, no tension sitting in the background, just stillness. And I didn't realize how loud those 2 days had been until it was gone. I walk inside, close the door, and just stand there for a second, letting it settle. Because for the first time since Friday, it actually feels like my space again. No alertness, no constant checking, no adjusting my behavior around something unpredictable, just normal, and that feeling alone was worth everything. I clean up the broken piece from earlier, take a minute to reset the apartment, put things back where they belong, and even that feels different because now I'm not reacting, I'm just restoring. Later that night, she texts me. Thank you so much for dealing with that, I really appreciate it. And I read it, sit there for a second, and then I reply, he should have been boarded from the start. Not aggressive, not emotional, just honest, and there's a pause, then she responds, yeah, you're probably right. Probably, that word again, still softening it, still not fully owning it. But at that point I don't push it, because honestly I'm done. Not angry anymore, not even that frustrated, just finished with the situation. Because the part that mattered wasn't just the stress. It was the fact that she knew, and chose not to say anything. That's what stuck with me. Not the barking, not the packing, not even the broken item. It was the lack of transparency. Because when someone asks you for a favor, they're trusting you to say yes, but you're also trusting them to tell you what you're actually agreeing to, and that didn't happen here. And after that weekend, our friendly neighbor dynamic basically disappeared. Not in a dramatic way, we still saw each other in the hallway sometimes, still said hi, but it was different, shorter, more distant, because once something like that happens, you don't really go back to casual trust. You just adjust and move on, and looking back, the whole situation taught me something simple. If someone is overly reassuring you that something is easy, there's a good chance it is, and if you don't ask the right questions up front, you might end up dealing with way more than you signed up for, and that's exactly what happened here. A simple weekend favor turned into something way more complicated just because one person chose to leave out the important part, and that's where this one ends. Alright, that one is just straight up frustrating. Not scary, not dramatic in a big way, just one of those situations where you realize too late that you didn't get the full picture, and once you're in it, you're kind of stuck dealing with the consequences. Anyway, for the next story, we're going back to something a bit more intense again. This one involves a situation at work, where one decision ends up exposing something much bigger than expected. Let's get into it. So this happened about a year ago, and it's one of those situations where everything started with something small, something that felt harmless at the time, and slowly turned into something way bigger than it should have been. At the time, I was working in a pretty standard office environment. Nothing unusual. Team-based work, shared responsibilities, deadlines, all of that, and overall, it was a good place to work. No major drama, no toxic culture, just normal. Now there was this coworker, let's call him Ryan. Ryan had been at the company longer than me, maybe by a year or so, and he was well liked, not because he was amazing at the job, but because he was easy to talk to. Funny, relaxed, good energy. The kind of person who fits in quickly anywhere. But at the same time, he had a bit of a reputation. Not officially, nothing written down, just one of those quiet understandings people have, that he wasn't always the most reliable. Deadlines slipped, details got missed, things like that. Nothing catastrophic, but enough that people noticed, and I knew that, everyone did. But again, it never felt like a big deal, until it became one. So one day he comes over to my desk, casual, like always, and says, "Hey man, quick favor." And already there's that moment, that internal pause, because quick favor at work rarely stays quick. But I say, "Yeah, what's up?" And he explains that he's running behind on something. A task we're both familiar with, nothing complicated, just time-consuming, and he asks if I can cover part of it for him. "Just this once," he says. Of course, it's always just once. And I hesitate for maybe a second, but then I think, all right. Not a big deal, we're on the same team. Helping each other out is normal, so I say yes. That was mistake number one. I take on part of his work, finish it, send it off. No issues, everything gets submitted on time. No one notices anything unusual. And Ryan thanks me, says he owes me one, and I don't think about it again, because in my mind, that's it. One small favor, done, except that's not how it ended. At first, nothing happens. No immediate consequences. No weird tension. No signs that anything is off. It just feels like a normal workday, which is exactly why it works. Because when something small goes smoothly, your brain files it away as harmless. So a few days later, Ryan comes back. Same tone, same casual energy. "Hey, quick thing," and I already feel that slight hesitation again, because now this isn't random anymore. But he explains it in a way that makes it sound reasonable. He's got a couple overlapping deadlines. Things got stacked weirdly. He just needs help balancing it out again. Temporary, just helping out. So I say yes again. Mistake number two, and just like before, it's not a huge task. Takes me maybe an extra hour or two. Nothing that breaks my day, but it does something important. It sets a pattern, because now it's not an exception anymore, it's a precedent. And over the next couple of weeks, it happens again. And again, not every day, not even every week. Just often enough, just spaced out enough that it doesn't immediately feel like a problem. But slowly, it adds up, and the way he asks is always the same. Casual, friendly, never demanding, always framed like a small favor. "Hey, can you take a quick look at this? Mind finishing this part? I'm tied up with something else. I'll get you back next time." And that last part never actually happens, because there is no next time where he helps me. There's just another time where I help him. And I start noticing something else too. He's not just behind occasionally, he's consistently behind. Like this isn't bad luck. This is how he operates, and I've unknowingly become part of that system. Filling in the gaps, quietly, and at first I justify it. I tell myself it's not that much extra work. We're a team. It's better than letting things fall behind. All reasonable thoughts, all completely wrong in this context, because what I'm actually doing is enabling him. And more importantly, I'm making it invisible, because from the outside, everything looks fine. Deadlines are being met, work is getting done. No red flags, but that's only because I'm covering the difference, and then something shifts, subtly but enough, because one day he doesn't even ask properly. He just says, "Hey, I left something in the shared folder. Can you handle that part? Not can you help? Not do you mind?" Just assumes, and that's when it hits me. This is no longer favor, this is expectation, and I sit there for a second looking at the message, realizing how we got here. Not because he forced it, but because I allowed it, step by step without pushing back, and that's when I start feeling something different, not just mild annoyance, but pressure, because now I'm not just doing extra work occasionally. I'm responsible for work that isn't mine, and if something goes wrong, it doesn't just affect him, it affects me too, and that thought with me, because I can feel where this is heading and I don't like it. So at this point, I'm not just mildly annoyed anymore, I'm aware, fully aware that something is off, but I still haven't said anything. And that's the problem, because when you recognize a pattern and don't interrupt it, it only gets stronger. So the workload continues, not overwhelming all at once, but consistently heavier than it should be. And the real issue isn't just the extra work, it's the timing, because now I'm starting to feel rushed on my own tasks, not missing deadlines. Not yet, but cutting it closer than I used to, rushing details, double-checking less, and that's not how I normally work. So one day I'm finishing something late in the afternoon, already behind where I want it to be, and Ryan comes over again, same relaxed tone. "Hey, quick thing," and this time something in me just stops because I can feel it. If I say yes again, this just continues. So I say, "I'm actually behind on my own stuff right now." Simple, honest, and for a second he pauses, like he wasn't expecting that, then he laughs a little. "Come on, it'll take you like 20 minutes. That line, that minimizing, and I feel that irritation rise up, because it's not just 20 minutes. It's every 20 minutes added together, over and over, so I shake my head. Not today, and that's the first real no. And you can feel the shift immediately, not dramatic, but noticeable. His expression changes slightly. Not angry, just less relaxed, and he says, "All right, no worries." But the tone is different, shorter, flatter, and he walks away, and for a moment I feel relieved, like I finally set a boundary, but that relief doesn't last long, because later that day I hear something, not directly, just overheard, a conversation between him and someone else, and I catch a piece of it. "Yeah, I asked him, but he said he was too busy." It's a simple sentence, but the way it's said has a tone, like I didn't help, like I dropped something, and I sit there realizing something important. The story is already shifting, because from his perspective, he's used to me saying yes. So now me saying no looks like a change, like I'm the one breaking the pattern, not him, and that's the subtle trap, because if you say yes enough times, people start expecting it. And when you finally say no, it feels like you're the one being difficult, even though you're just correcting something that shouldn't have been happening in the first place. And over the next few days, I start noticing more small comments, subtle things, nothing direct, nothing confrontational, just little hints that something being said behind the scenes. And at the same time, his work starts slipping more because I'm not stepping in anymore. Deadlines are tighter, mistakes are more visible, and now there's no one smoothing it out quietly. And that's when things start catching attention. Not immediately, but enough that people begin asking questions, and I can feel it building. That moment where something that was hidden is about to become obvious, and when it does, it's not going to be a small conversation. It doesn't happen all at once. There's no big moment where everything suddenly collapses. It starts subtly, like most things do. One project gets flagged, nothing major, just a note that something felt rushed, then another. A small inconsistency, a detail that doesn't line up, and on their own, these things wouldn't mean much, but together they start forming a pattern. And eventually that pattern gets noticed. So one afternoon, my manager calls me in. Nothing unusual on the surface, just a standard check-in. But the moment I sit down, I can tell this isn't just routine. Her tone is more focused, more deliberate, and she says, "I wanted to go over a few recent projects." And immediately, I know where this is going, so I nod. "Sure," and she starts listing them. The ones I recognize, the shared ones, the ones where I covered parts, the ones where I didn't, and she points out the differences. Carefully, not accusing, just observing. This one was strong. This one felt inconsistent. This one seemed rushed, and I can see it clearly now. The pattern I've been living in is visible from the outside too, just not in the way I expected, because from her perspective, this isn't about Ryan, it's about output, and I'm part of that output. So she asks, "Can you walk me through how these were handled?" And I take a second, because this is the moment, the one I've been avoiding, the one where I either stay quiet or finally say something, and I choose halfway. I explain the process. Mention that some tasks were shared, that responsibilities were split, but I don't go all the way. I don't say I was covering for him. I don't expose it directly, and I can tell that's not enough because she listens. Nods, but her expression doesn't fully settle. There's still uncertainty, still something missing. And she says, I just want to make sure everything is clear going forward. I need consistency. Consistency, that word again, and I nod. Of course, but internally I know, this isn't resolved, this is just noted, and as I leave the office I feel that pressure again, stronger now because this is no longer internal. It's not just me noticing the issue. Management is seeing the effects, but not the cause, and that's a dangerous place to be, because if something breaks, it won't matter how it got there. It'll just matter that it did, and I'm part of it. Later that day, Ryan comes over again, but this time his tone is different. More cautious, less casual. Hey, everything good? And I can tell he knows something is shifting, maybe not everything, but enough, and I say, yeah, why? And he shrugs. Just feels like things are getting tighter. Tighter, that's one way to put it, and I nod. Yeah, they are, and there's a pause, and for a second it feels like he might say something more, acknowledge it, address it, but he doesn't. He just says, all right, and walks away, and that's when it really hits me. He's not going to fix this, he's going to keep adapting around it, and unless I do something, this situation is going to keep leaning on me until it breaks. After that meeting I can feel it, that quiet pressure building, not panic, not yet, but something close. Because now it's not just an inconvenience, it's risk, real risk, and the worst part is I'm still not fully out of it. Even though I've started saying no more often, there's still overlap, still shared work. Still situations where things get blurred, and that's exactly where things go wrong. A few days later, we're working on a larger project. More visibility, more attention. The kind of thing where mistakes actually matter, so everything is structured, clear assignments, defined responsibilities, at least on paper, and I make a conscious decision. I stay in my lane, I do my part, I don't touch anything that isn't mine. No fixing, no covering, no stepping in, and for a while it works. Clean. Simple, exactly how it should have been from the start, until the deadline hits. And something is off, not small, not subtle, something important is missing. A key section, the kind of thing that gets noticed immediately, and the moment it's flagged, everything tightens. Emails, messages, questions. What happened here? Was this completed? Who handled this section? And I feel it instantly. That drop in my stomach, because I already know the answer. I know exactly what happened. But what I don't know yet is how it's about to be framed. So I check the files, look at the timeline, the assignments, and it's clear. That section was Ryan's, fully, no overlap, no confusion, his responsibility, and he didn't do it or didn't finish it. And now we're here, so I wait, because this is the moment. The one where things either stay clear or get blurred again. And then the message comes, from him, in the group chat. Hey, I thought we were both handling that part. And I just stare at it, because there it is. The shift, the attempt, not direct blame, not an accusation, just enough ambiguity, enough uncertainty to pull me into it, and I can feel it, that immediate tension, because if I stay quiet, it becomes shared, if I speak, it becomes clear. And this time I don't hesitate, I reply, that section was assigned to you. Simple, direct, no emotion, just fact, and there's a pause in the chat, longer than usual, because now it's visible. To everyone, and Ryan responds, oh, I thought we split it like before. Like before, and that phrase says everything. Because he's trying to pull the past pattern into the present, trying to make it sound normal, expected, shared, and I reply again, we didn't, short, final, and now there's no room left, no grey area, just clarity, and you can feel the shift in the room, even through messages, because now it's not a team issue, it's a specific issue. And it has a name attached to it, and for the first time, it's not mine. After that exchange, things move fast, faster than anything before, because once something like that becomes visible, it doesn't stay quiet. So within the hour there's a meeting scheduled, not a casual one, not a check-in, a proper review, and I already know this is it. This is where everything either gets clarified or gets messy again. So I join the call, camera on, everyone there, manager, couple team members, and Ryan. Right away the tone is different, no small talk, no easing into it, just straight to the point. We need to understand what happened with this section. And I can feel that tension again. But this time it's not the same because I'm not uncertain, I know exactly what I did, and more importantly what I didn't do, so Ryan speaks first. Of course he does, same pattern, same confidence. Well, we had been sharing similar tasks before, so I assumed this was handled the same way. Assumed, that word, carefully chosen, because it removes responsibility, turns it into misunderstanding, not failure, and I just sit there listening, waiting because I know this isn't enough, and my manager asks, was that clearly communicated? And there's a pause, a real one this time, because now we're not talking about assumptions anymore, we're talking about structure. And Ryan says, I thought it was understood. Thought, again, no confirmation, no clarity, just interpretation. And then she turns to me, can you clarify your understanding of the task? And this is the moment. The cleanest one I've had so far, no pressure to guess, no need to soften anything, just truth. So I say that section was assigned to Ryan. I handled my part and didn't make any changes outside of it. Clear, direct, nothing extra, and there's silence, because now the difference is obvious, not emotional, not personal, just factual, and she nods, slowly. Then pulls up the project breakdown, the actual assignment sheet, and there it is on screen, black and white, names next to sections, no ambiguity, no overlap, no confusion, and Ryan's name is right there, next to the missing part, and you can feel it, that shift, that moment where everything stops being debatable, because now it's not about interpretation, it's about evidence, and for the first time he doesn't have a smooth response. He tries, says something about timeline pressure. Misunderstanding the scope. But it doesn't land the same, because the structure is clear, and the gap is visible, and my manager says we need to make sure responsibilities are followed as assigned. Neutral, professional, but firm, and that's it, no big confrontation, no calling anyone out directly, but the message is clear, and after the meeting ends there's that quiet aftermath, that feeling of something settling, because for the first time everything is aligned, what I've been experiencing. What I've been seeing, what I've been dealing with, it's no longer just internal. It's recognized, out loud, and most importantly, it's not attached to me anymore. After that meeting, everything changes, not dramatically, not in some huge cinematic way. No one storms out, no one gets fired on the spot. It's quieter than that. But if you've ever worked in an office, you know that sometimes the quiet changes are the biggest ones, because once people see something clearly, they start interacting with it differently, and that's exactly what happened. Over the next few days, my manager gets a lot more specific. Not just with Ryan, with everything, who owns what, who finishes what, who signs off on what. All of a sudden there's structure where there used to be vagueness, and for me that feels like relief, actual relief, because now there's less room for things to blur together, less room for I thought we were both handling that, less room for assumptions. And Ryan, you can tell he feels it too, because the casual energy he used to have, it's gone, not completely, but enough. He's quieter, more careful, a little less confident in the way he moves around people, and I don't think it's because anyone is being harsh with him, it's because the system changed, and he can't lean on the old one anymore. No more quiet coverage, no more invisible help, no more borrowed reliability. Now, if something is his, it stays his. And that's a very different situation for someone who's been used to soft landings. One afternoon, maybe a week later, he comes over to my desk, and for a second I think maybe he's going to ask for something again, but he doesn't. Stands there for a moment and says, "Can we talk?" And his tone is different, no lightness, no friendly setup, just direct, so I say, "Sure." We step off to the side, and there's a pause before he says anything, like he's trying to decide how to frame it. Then he says, "You could have handled that differently." And honestly, I'm not even surprised, because of course that's how he sees it, not as the outcome of a long pattern, not as something that built over time, just that one moment. That one meeting, that one clarification. So I ask how, and he exhales through his nose a little, not quite annoyed, more like frustrated. "You made it look like I dropped everything." And that line actually sticks with me for a second, because the truth is I didn't make it look like that. He did drop it. All I did was stop catching it, and I say that not cruelly, just plainly. I didn't make it look like anything, I just didn't cover for it, and there's silence after that. A real one, because I think on some level he knows that's true. He just doesn't like hearing it said that clearly. Then he says, "I thought we had each other's backs." And that's the part that really gets me, because that sounds good. Loyal even, except that is what was happening. Having someone's back at work means helping occasionally, supporting each other when things get rough. It does not mean quietly taking responsibility for someone's repeated lack of follow-through. That's not teamwork. That's dependency, so I tell him that, again calmly. "I helped you out more than once, but that turned into me carrying things I wasn't supposed to be carrying." He doesn't interrupt, doesn't argue, just listens. And for the first time he doesn't really have an answer, because the pattern is too obvious now, too clear, and after a second he just nods, small, tight, and says, "All right." That's it, no apology, no real acknowledgement, just "all right," and then he walks away. And honestly, that's the moment I know the whole thing is over, not the work situation. That was already changing. I mean the dynamic between us. Whatever casual friendliness we had before, it's done. Because once trust gets replaced by utility, once you realize someone mostly valued you because you made their life easier, it's hard to see them the same way again. After that, we still work together. But it's different. Minimal conversation. No favors, no gray areas, just tasks. Assignments, clear lines, and weirdly enough, that's when things finally become manageable again. Because once the roles are actually defined, there's less tension. Less resentment, less confusion, and for the first time in months I feel like I'm just doing my job, not mine and someone else. After that, things settle, not instantly, but steadily. The system stays stricter, responsibilities stay clear, and over time that becomes the new normal. Ryan doesn't get fired, not right away. But things definitely change for him. He's watched more closely, given less room for error, less flexibility, and that casual reputation he had before, it starts to fade. Because once people see a pattern clearly, it's hard to unsee it. He improves a bit, enough to get by, enough to not immediately lose his position. But the dynamic is different now. People rely on him less, double-check more, keep things tighter around him, and that kind of shift sticks, as for me. My situation improves, not dramatically. No big reward, no sudden promotion, just clarity, and honestly that's enough, because now my work reflects my work. No hidden overlap, no silent corrections, no blurred ownership, and my manager notices. Not in some big announcement, just small things, more direct feedback, more trust in assignments, more visibility, and that matters, because that's what I was almost losing without realizing it. All because I didn't set a boundary early enough, and that's the part that stuck with me the most. Not what Ryan did, not the missed deadlines, not even the meeting, it was how easily it all started. One small favor, one no big deal, one decision to help without thinking about what happens if it becomes expected, because that's how these situations build, not through big moments, through small ones repeated enough times that they become normal, and once something becomes normal, it's a lot harder to undo. So if there's one thing I took from that whole situation, it's this: helping someone once is fine. Helping someone repeatedly without limits is where it turns into something else. And if you don't define that line early, someone else will define it for you, and you probably won't like where it ends up, and that's where this one ends. All right, that one is just a classic situation. Starts small, feels harmless, and then slowly turns into something way bigger. Because nobody stops it early, and honestly, a lot of people probably relate to that one. Anyway, for the last story tonight, we're going in a slightly different direction again. This one starts off normal, but turns into something that feels off in a completely different way. Let's get into it. So this one isn't about something obvious. No big argument, no clear moment where everything goes wrong. It's more like a slow shift, something that changes over time so gradually. You don't notice it right away, until suddenly you do. So this is about a friend of mine. Let's call him Daniel. We've known each other for years, not just casual friends, proper friends, hung out regularly, talked almost every day. Played games, grabbed food, just normal stuff, the kind of friendship where you don't really question it, it's just there, consistent, easy, and for the longest time that's exactly how it was. Nothing complicated, nothing weird, just solid. But then something started changing, and at first it was so small I didn't even register it. He just replied a little slower, not ignoring me, not disappearing, just taking longer. And again, that's normal. People get busy, work life, whatever, so I didn't think anything of it. Then it happened again and again. And eventually it became a pattern, where before we'd go back and forth all day, now it was more like I'd send something and get a reply hours later, sometimes even the next day. Still friendly, still normal, just delayed. And again I told myself the same thing. He's probably just busy. No reason to read into it, so I didn't. But then other things started shifting too. When we did hang out, he felt different, still there, still talking, still joking, but less engaged, like part of his attention was somewhere else. And it's hard to explain that feeling. Because on paper, nothing is wrong, but in reality, something is off. Like you're talking to someone who's only halfway present, and you start noticing it in small ways. He'd check his phone more often, zone out mid-conversation, take a second longer to respond to things that used to come naturally, and I remember thinking, okay, something going on, but I didn't push it, because again, nothing was clearly wrong, no argument, no conflict, just change, and change is easy to ignore when you don't want to make it into something bigger, so I let it continue. Which, looking back, was mistake number one, because whatever was happening wasn't random, and it wasn't temporary, it was building, slowly, and I just didn't see it yet. So over the next couple of weeks, the pattern continues. Same slower replies, same slightly distant energy when we hang out, and at this point I'm definitely noticing it. I'm just not doing anything about it, because it's still in that grey area, not bad enough to confront, but too consistent to ignore completely. And then something new gets added to it. He starts cancelling plans, not often at first, just once. We had something set up, nothing big, just grabbing food, and an hour before he texts, hey sorry, something came up, rain check, normal, totally normal. Stuff happens, so I say yeah, no problem, we reschedule, and then it happens again, different day, different excuse, work ran late, didn't sleep well, not really feeling it today, and again. Each one individually makes sense, none of them are unreasonable, but together they start forming something. A pattern of pulling away, and I think that's when it really hits me, not as a full realization, just a feeling, like he's choosing not to be there, and that's a very different thing than just being busy. So the next time we actually do meet up, I pay more attention, not in an obvious way, just more aware, and within the first 10 minutes I notice it again. That same half-presence. We're sitting there talking and he's listening, but not fully, like he's processing something else at the same time, and I test it a little. I say something that would normally get a reaction, a joke, something specific to him, and there's a delay, a noticeable one, then he responds, laughs. But it's slightly off, like he's catching up to the moment instead of being in it, and that's when I start feeling it more clearly. This isn't just distraction. This is disengagement, gradual, quiet, but real, so I decide to say something, not confrontational, just checking in. Hey, are you good? And he looks at me, immediately, like that question cuts through whatever he was thinking about, and he says, yeah, why? And I hesitate, because I don't want to sound accusatory. So I keep it light, you've just seemed a bit off lately. And there's a pause, not long but enough, then he shrugs, I've just had a lot on my mind. That answer is both something and nothing at the same time, because it explains the behavior without actually explaining anything. So I nod, yeah, fair, and I don't push further, because he didn't open the door for it, and I didn't want to force it, and for the rest of that hangout, things are fine. On the surface, conversation flows. Talk about random stuff, nothing tense, nothing uncomfortable, but that underlying feeling, it doesn't go away. And when we leave, I realize something. I didn't feel better after seeing him, which is unusual, because normally hanging out with him resets things, feels easy. This time it just confirmed that something was different, and I still didn't know what, but I knew it wasn't just temporary, because people don't slowly pull away like that for no reason. A few days after that, something happens that sticks with me, not because it's huge, but because it's the first thing that feels actually wrong. So I message him one evening, nothing serious. Just send him a meme, then ask if he wants to hop on later and play something for a bit. Pretty normal for us. Usually he'd either say yes or at least reply with some kind of joke. But this time nothing, no response for hours. And again, that by itself isn't strange anymore. At this point, delayed replies have kind of become the norm, so I leave it, go about my night. And then a little later I see him online, not just active, actually in a game, playing with other people, and I just stare at it for a second. Because now the busy explanation doesn't fit the same way. It's one thing to not reply because you're occupied. It's another thing to ignore someone while clearly doing the exact thing they just invited you to do. And the part that got to me wasn't even that he was playing with other people. That's fine, obviously, he's allowed to do that. It was the silence, the decision to say nothing, no can't tonight, no already on, no maybe later, just nothing. And I know how small that sounds, I do, but when someone has already been slowly drifting, little things like that feel louder because they stop looking random. They start looking intentional, so I don't say anything that night, I don't message again. I don't make it weird, I just close the app and leave it alone. But now there's this thought in my head that I can't really get rid of, that maybe he's not just distant, maybe he's avoiding me, and once that thought shows up, everything starts filtering through it. The next day he replies, just says, sorry man, passed out early, while being visibly online, and I read that message probably 3 times, not because I don't understand it, because I do. I understand exactly what it is. A cover, a lazy one too, and that's what makes it feel different, because now it's not just distance, it's dishonesty. Small dishonesty, sure, but still, and when people start lying about little things, it usually means they don't want to explain the real thing, so I send back something simple. No worries, because what else am I supposed to say? Hey, I literally saw you online with other people. That sounds petty, even if it's true, and honestly. Part of me still wants a more innocent explanation. Some misunderstanding, some weird coincidence, anything that makes it less obvious than it feels. But then it happens again, not the exact same situation, but close enough. A few days later I ask if he wants to grab food. He says he's wiped out and probably just staying in. Totally fair, except that later that night one of our mutual friends posts a story, and Daniel is in it, out somewhere, not at home, not staying in. Actually out, and again that same feeling. Not anger exactly. More-like that hollow realization that something is being hidden from you in a way that's too deliberate to ignore. And suddenly all those slow replies, cancelled plans, vague answers, they start lining up in a different way, not as stress, not as busyness, as avoidance, careful avoidance. And the worst part is I still don't know why. That's what keeps looping in my head, not just that something is off, but that I don't understand what changed. Because if we had a fight, fine. If I'd said something wrong, fine. If there was an actual moment I could point to, at least that would be something. But this is like being slowly moved out of someone's life without ever being told it's happening. And that kind of thing messes with your head, because now you start going back through everything, trying to figure out when it changed, what you missed, what you did, and the more I think about it, the less I can find. Somehow makes it worse. Because if there's no obvious reason, then what am I supposed to do with that? At this point, I can't just ignore it anymore, because now it's not just a feeling, it's a pattern, clear enough that pretending I don't see it just feels stupid. So I decide I'm going to ask directly, not aggressively, not confrontational, just clear, so I message him, "Hey, are you free later? I want to talk about something." And he replies quicker than usual, "Yeah, sure." Which already feels different, because when it's casual, he takes his time. When it's serious, he responds immediately. So later that evening, we meet up. Same place we usually go, nothing special. And for the first few minutes, it's normal, small talk, random stuff, almost like both of us are avoiding the reason we're actually there. And then there's a pause, and I just say it, "I feel like you've been avoiding me." No build-up, no soft entry, just direct, and he looks at me. Not shocked, not defensive, just still, like he knew this was coming, and for a second, he doesn't say anything. Then he exhales slightly and says, "I'm not avoiding you." And that answer feels automatic, like it's the first thing you say before you actually decide how honest you want to be, so I don't argue it, I just follow up. "Then what is it?" And again there's that pause, that hesitation, and then he shrugs. "I've just been busy, back to that, and this time." Doesn't land at all because we've already passed that explanation. So I say, "I've seen you out, I've seen you online, it's not just that." Still calm, but more grounded now, because I'm not guessing anymore, I'm referencing real things, and he looks away for a second, not long, just enough, and when he looks back, his expression has changed slightly, less neutral, more guarded, and he says, "Okay, I just haven't felt like hanging out as much." And there it is, not the full truth. But closer, and it hits, not in a dramatic way, just quietly, because hearing it out loud makes it real, so I ask why, and this time he hesitates longer, actually thinking, not just deflecting, and I can see it on his face. That internal moment where he's deciding how much to say, and then he says something that I didn't expect. "I don't know, it just feels different lately." Different, that word again. Same as in the relationship story, and just like before. It explains everything and nothing at the same time, so I ask what feels different, and he shifts slightly in his seat, not uncomfortable exactly, just not relaxed, and then he says, "I feel like you've changed a bit." And that catches me off guard, because up until now I've been focused entirely on him changing, not the other way around, so I ask how, and he shrugs again. But this time it feels less dismissive, more like he genuinely doesn't have a clean answer. "I don't know, you just seem more intense lately." Intense, and I sit there for a second trying to process that, because from my perspective I've just been reacting to his distance. But from his perspective maybe that reaction looks like pressure, like expectation, like something heavier than before, and suddenly this whole situation looks different, not completely reversed, but more complicated, because now it's not just, he pulled away, it's, something shifted between us. And neither of us handled it well, and I say, "I didn't realize that," and he nods slightly. "Yeah," and there's this moment, where it almost feels like we're about to understand each other, like maybe this is where things start getting better, but then he adds, "And I think I just needed some space." And that's when it shifts again, because space isn't something he asked for, it's something he took, quietly, without saying anything, and that's what made it feel like avoidance instead of distance. So I say, "You could have just said that," and he nods. "Yeah, probably, but there's no apology in it, just acknowledgement," and that's when I realize we're not really resolving anything here, we're just explaining how we got to this point. So after he says that he needed space, there's this quiet moment, where on the surface it feels like we've identified the issue, but underneath something still doesn't line up. Because space explains the distance, but it doesn't explain the way it happened. The silence, the half-truths, the avoidance. So I sit there for a second and then I ask, "Is that all it is?" And he looks at me, really looks this time, and I can tell immediately there's more. He just hasn't decided whether to say it, and there's a longer pause than before. Not awkward, just heavy, and then he says, "Not really," and that's the moment. The one where everything shifts again, because now we're not circling around it anymore, we're about to get into it, so I don't interrupt, I just wait, and he leans back slightly, takes a breath and says, "I feel like things got a bit one-sided." One-sided, that word lands because that's not something I expected at all, so I ask, "What do you mean?" And he explains, slowly, carefully. He's been thinking about this for a while. "I feel like I've been there for you a lot, and lately it hasn't really felt the same the other way around." And I just sit there, processing, because from my perspective that's not how it felt at all, so I say, "I didn't realize that," and he nods. "I know that's part of it." And then he gives an example, not aggressive, not accusatory, just specific. Mentions a time a few weeks back where he was dealing with something, stress from work. Nothing huge, but enough that he wanted to talk. And I remember that moment, but not the way he does, because in my memory we talked, we had a normal conversation, nothing seemed off, but from his side it was different. He says, I felt like you were kind of distracted, like you weren't really there. And that hits because I can't deny it, not completely. I remember being tired that day, thinking about something else, probably not fully present, and at the time, it didn't feel like a big deal, just a slightly off conversation. But to him it stuck, and he continues, and it kind of kept happening. Not constantly, not every time, but enough that it changed how he felt, and now I'm starting to see it, not as one big issue, but as a collection of small moments that added up on his side without me realizing. And that's the part that's hard to deal with, because you don't get a clear moment to fix. You get a slow accumulation. So I say, I didn't know it felt like that for you, and he nods. Yeah, and there's no anger in it, just honesty. And then he adds something that really reframes everything. I think I just stopped feeling like reaching out as much. Stopped feeling like reaching out, not because he didn't care, but because the response didn't feel the same anymore, and that's what led to the distance. Not a sudden decision, not a clean break, just less motivation to stay connected. And I sit there, realizing something uncomfortable. From my perspective, he started pulling away first. From his perspective, he was reacting to something that had already changed. And both of those can be true at the same time. And that's what makes it complicated, because now there's no clear who caused it. Just a shift that neither of us addressed when it was small, and now it's bigger and harder to fix. And I ask, why didn't you say something earlier? And he shrugs slightly. I didn't think it was that big at first. And there it is again, that pattern, small things ignored early becoming bigger later. And I realize we both did the same thing, just in different ways. After that, the conversation changes, not because things get worse, but because they get more real. Up until now, everything had been vague, distance, space, feeling off, but now there's an actual shape to it, something both of us can point to, and weirdly, that makes it both better and worse. Better, because at least I'm not sitting there guessing anymore. Worse, because now I understand that this didn't come out of nowhere. It built quietly, over time, and I missed it, so for a little while we actually talk. Properly, more honestly than we had in weeks, maybe months. He mentions a few more moments that stuck with him. Not huge things, that's what makes it hard. None of them are dramatic. None of them are obvious friendship-ending moments. Just little times he felt like he was showing up more than I was. Times he felt dismissed, or like I wasn't really listening, or like the energy had shifted and he was the only one noticing it. And the annoying part is, as he says them, I can see how it happened. Not because I meant to do it, not because I stopped caring, but because sometimes, when a friendship feels established, solid, safe, you stop paying close attention. You assume the foundation is strong enough to carry a few off days. And usually that's true, until those off days start stacking up. So I tell him that, I say, I don't think I realized how much those moments mattered to you. And he nods, not bitterly, just like that's exactly the problem. And he says, yeah, and I probably should have said something when it was smaller. And that's the first moment where it feels mutual. Not in the sense that blame is perfectly shared, but in the sense that we both let the drift happen. We both kept waiting for the other person to correct it, and instead the distance just got more normal. The problem is, even with all of that understood, something still feels off. Because understanding a problem isn't the same as fixing it, and I think both of us realize that at the same time. There's a pause in the conversation, a long one, not awkward, just honest, and then I ask, so what do we do with that? And he exhales slightly, looks down for a second, then says, I don't know, and I believe him, because this isn't one of those situations where someone is hiding the answer. I think he genuinely doesn't know, and maybe neither do I, because if this had been one argument, one misunderstanding, one clean moment, you could address it, apologize, reset, move forward, but this is different. This is two people slowly shifting out of sync, then only noticing once the gap is already there, and those things are harder, way harder. Because they don't just ask for an apology, they ask for momentum to come back, for comfort to return naturally, for trust in the dynamic to rebuild, and none of that happens just because you had one honest conversation. So I say, I don't want things to stay like this, and he nods, I know, not me neither, not they won't, just I know. And that answer tells me more than anything else has so far, because it sounds like someone who cares, but isn't sure they have the energy to rebuild what changed. And that's a hard thing to hear, not because it's cruel, because it is, it's just tired, real. And then he says something that sticks with me. I think once I got used to the distance, it stopped feeling temporary. That line lands hard because that's exactly what happened. The gap stopped feeling like a weird phase and started becoming the new version of the friendship. And once that happens, people adapt. They emotionally rearrange themselves around the new reality. They expect less, reach out less, need less, and that makes reconnecting harder because now you're not just rebuilding closeness. You're undoing a whole new normal, and that takes effort from both people at the same time. And I'm sitting there realizing something I really didn't want to admit. This conversation might have come too late, not because we hate each other, not because the friendship meant nothing, but because sometimes, by the time you finally say the honest thing, the emotional movement has already happened, quietly, without announcement. And even if both people understand it, that doesn't mean they can reverse it. After that conversation, we don't argue, we don't make any big decisions, we just leave it there, which at the time feels like the right move. Like maybe giving it space after actually talking things through will let things settle naturally. Maybe things will reset a bit. Maybe we'll find our way back into the usual rhythm, but that's not what happens. What actually happens is nothing, no dramatic fallout, no sudden break, just continuation of the same distance, the same slower replies, the same reduced effort, except now it feels different, because before I didn't know why, now I do. And somehow that makes it heavier, because now every delayed message, every cancelled plan, every slightly off interaction isn't just a random thing, it's part of a pattern that's already been explained. And that makes it harder to ignore. We still talk, just less. We still see each other, just not as often. And when we do, it's fine, not bad, not awkward, just lighter, surface level, like we've both subconsciously agreed not to go too deep anymore. And I can feel myself doing it too, not pushing conversations, not bringing things up, not trying to fix anything constantly. Because after that talk, I realized something important. You can't force a connection back into place, even if you understand exactly what went wrong. And I think he realized something similar, because he stops pulling away actively, but he also doesn't move closer again. He just stays where he is, and that middle space is where things slowly settle into something new, not broken, not hostile, just different, and I notice it in small ways. We stop sending random things during the day, the kind of messages that don't need a response, just sharing something because it reminded you of the other person. Those disappear. Our conversations become more intentional, more purposeful, less automatic, and that's a huge shift because effortless communication is usually a sign of closeness, and once it requires effort, it's not the same anymore. One day, maybe a couple weeks later, I realize something that kind of hits me. I haven't talked to him in 3 days. No messages, no memes, nothing, and it wasn't a conscious decision on either side, it just didn't happen, and that's when it really sinks in, not in a dramatic way, just quietly. That the friendship as it used to be is already gone, not destroyed, not ended with a clear moment, just faded, and I don't even feel angry. Hurt in a sharp way, it's more like that slow, dull realization, like looking at something and understanding it's not what it used to be and probably won't be again. And later that week we do talk again, briefly, casually, and it's fine, but it also confirms it because it feels like catching up, not continuing, and that's a very specific feeling. When you can't really mistake, and I don't say anything about it, neither does he, because at that point, there's nothing left to clarify. We already had the honest conversation, we already understand what happened, now we're just living with the result, so after that, things don't end, not officially, we don't sit down and say, alright, this friendship is over. There's no moment like that, no final message, no last conversation, it just becomes something else. Over time, we talk less and less, not intentionally, not as a decision, just naturally. Like two people slowly stepping out of sync. And then continuing on slightly different paths. Every now and then we still check in, a short message, a quick reply, maybe a brief conversation, but it's different, it always is. Because that old rhythm, that easy, constant connection never really comes back. And I think at some point we both accept that, without saying it, because there's nothing to argue, nothing to fix, nothing to confront anymore. Everything that needed to be said was already said, and what's left is just the result of it, and honestly, that's what makes it feel strange, because there's no clear ending, no moment you can point to and say, that's when it stopped. It just fades, gradually, quietly, until one day you realize you're not really part of each other's daily lives anymore, and you didn't even notice when that became normal, and looking back, that's the part that stayed with me the most, not the distance itself, not even the reason for it, but how easily it happened. How something that felt completely stable, completely solid, could shift just through small moments. Small disconnects, small missed signals, that neither of us treated as important at the time. And maybe that's the takeaway, not that someone did something terrible, not that one person is at fault, but that sometimes relationships don't break. They just change, and if you don't catch that change early, if you don't talk about it when it's still small, it can turn into something bigger. Without ever feeling like a big moment. And by the time you do talk about it, you might already be adjusting to the distance, instead of trying to close it. And once that happens, it's hard to go back. Not impossible, but it takes effort from both sides at the same time, and if that doesn't happen, things don't explode. They just fade, and that's what happened here, and that's where this one ends. Studio final outro all right, that one is a different kind of story. No big drama. No crazy twist, just something that probably feels familiar to a lot of people, because not every ending is loud. Some of them are just quiet. Anyway, that's going to be it for this video. If you made it all the way through, appreciate you being here. And if you've ever had something like this happen, you probably know exactly how it feels. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.